take a moment to look up. Tonight, we are learning from the Bedouin's quiet conversation with the sky, lessons of observation, patience, and deep respect for the natural world. As the stars once guided their journeys, they can guide us to stillness and meaning, too. If you enjoy gentle travels like this, please subscribe and turn on the bell, so we can meet under the night sky every week. And tell me in the comments, what forgotten wisdom from the past do you think still holds power today? Imagine navigating endless deserts without a single compass, guided only by the stars above. For centuries, the Bedouin people mastered this incredible feat, turning the night sky into their most reliable map. How did their ancient wisdom unlock such profound celestial secrets, and what can their nomadic ingenuity teach us even today, in an age of GPS? Forget everything you thought you knew about boring history. What if I told you that an ancient culture, living under some of the harshest conditions on Earth, possessed a cosmic understanding so deep it rivaled modern astronomy? Uncover the untold story of the Bedouin, whose timeless connection to the stars allowed them to not just survive, but thrive across vast, uncharted lands. Stop scrolling for just a moment and embark on a journey back in time, to an era where the stars were more than just distant lights, they were life itself. Discover the captivating world of the Bedouin, whose incredible celestial knowledge and nomadic spirit shaped an entire civilization. If you've ever wondered how ancient peoples truly navigated, this peaceful exploration into their enduring legacy is a must-watch. The desert has always been a place of paradox, empty yet full, silent yet speaking, harsh yet tender to those who know its language. To step into its vastness is to step into a classroom without walls, where the ceiling is not thatched or tiled, but infinite, stitched with stars. For the Bedouin, this was no metaphor. The desert truly was their school, and the stars their teachers. Each grain of sand, each shift of wind, each constellation drawn in the heavens carried within it a lesson waiting to be read. Imagine yourself, not as you are now, but centuries ago. You stand at the edge of a dune, your sandals sinking slightly into the cool, shifting ground. The heat of the day has retreated into the memory of the stones, and the night spreads gently across the desert. Shadows lengthen and soften until they vanish altogether, leaving only the endless pale glow of moonlight. Then, as the hours deepen, the moon too drifts away, and above you is revealed the true treasure of the desert, the sky, unbroken, uninterrupted, unpolluted by anything man has built. It is an ocean inverted, flowing not with water but with light. Many. Such a sky would simply be beautiful, a thing to marvel at before turning back to sleep. But to the Bedouin, it was scripture, history, map, and prophecy all in one. This was not a passive beauty, but an active guide. The desert at night was not empty. It was full of directions, full of instructions, written in languages older than speech. You lie back on the sand, feeling the faint warmth still held in its surface. The wind hums quietly, combing the dunes as though smoothing out a blanket. Around you, camels groan softly as they kneel, their burdens lifted for the night. A few fires flicker in the distance, their orange glow fragile beneath the towering dome of sky. The people gather close to them, not to shield themselves from the cold, it is tolerable, but to share stories and mark time, for the desert's clock is not mechanical. It is stellar above, Orion rises, his belt a straight line cutting cleanly across the heavens. To the Bedouin, this was more than a hunter. It was a signal of orientation, of the east. The Pleiades glimmer in a tight cluster, their soft blue haze a reminder that the seasons are shifting, that migration may soon be wise. Polaris, the North Star, holds steady, unblinking, like a sentinel keeping watch while all else moves. These stars were not ornaments. They were instructions, etched in fire, precise and dependable. A child might sit beside his grandfather, eyes wide, the firelight dancing on his cheeks. The elder's hand lifts, slow and steady, pointing to the still point of Polaris. There. He says softly, the one who does not move. Trust it, and you will never be lost. The boy nods, not with words but with breath, his gaze fastening onto the light that will outlive them both. The desert is patient. It allows lessons to be given slowly. And in this patience, memory deepens. Silence is a companion in this classroom. It is not emptiness, but a canvas on which the stars write their messages. The dunes shift, the wind murmurs, the embers glow, but always the silence holds. It teaches the most important lesson, to listen. Not with ears, but with eyes and with heart. A man who cannot listen to silence cannot survive in the desert. This way of learning was never hurried. A boy learned the constellations not in one night, but over seasons, watching them tilt and turn across the horizon, waiting for the times when certain stars vanished and others appeared. He learned to measure nights by the climb of the moon, to sense directions by the way shadows stretched across sand. Each lesson was wrapped in repetition, delivered again and again beneath the same stars, until it became not something memorized, but something lived, and yet, this was more than practical knowledge. Yes, the stars gave direction, told when to travel, when to rest, when the rains might come. But they also offered something deeper, perspective. To gaze upward and see a sky so vast, so filled with uncountable fires, was to be reminded of one's smallness. And yet, in that smallness, there was comfort. For though the desert was vast and could swallow a man in its silence, the stars promised order. They promised that a path existed, even if unseen. This is why the Bedouin often spoke of the stars as companions. In their poetry, they were not lifeless points but beings with roles, guardians of direction, keepers of memory. To sleep beneath them was to rest under the watch of 1,000 eyes. To journey by them was to walk along paths carved into the heavens. The desert might test the body, but the stars sustain the spirit. Consider how different this is from our lives now. Where we reach for devices, they reached for the sky. Where we panic at being lost, they found assurance in the very thing that to outsiders looked most confusing: endless dunes, endless silence. They carried within them the calm of knowing that no matter how dark the night, the heavens always offered light. The desert's classroom is not gone. Even now, if you travel far from the cities, away from their electric haze, you will see it again. The same stars, the same silence. You will lie on sand that has cradled countless generations, and above you, the constellations will whisper their same eternal lessons. You may not need them to guide your footsteps, but they will still guide your thoughts, reminding you of patience, humility, and trust in what endures. The Bedouin did not conquer the desert with force. They survived it with wisdom, a wisdom that flowed as much from the heavens as from the earth. Their classroom was boundless, their teachers immortal, their lessons eternal. To study under such a sky was to belong to something greater, something that stretched far beyond the horizon, something written in silence and in light. And so, as the fire dims, and the camels sigh into sleep, and the sand cools beneath your body, you close your eyes not in fear of the dark, but in comfort. For the stars above remain, steady and faithful, the same teachers they have always been. And in their quiet brilliance, you too become a student of the desert's cosmic classroom. The first lesson the desert gives is not dramatic. It is not a thunderclap, not a flash of sudden understanding. It is quieter than that, so quiet you could miss it if you rush. The lesson arrives with the same patience as dusk, with the same softness as stars appearing one by one. It teaches you how to find a way when everything looks the same, how to move when the world is a repeating pattern of sand and silence. The Bedouin did not learn this in a single night, nor from a single teacher. They learned it in layers. They way dunes are built, grain by grain, until, looking back, a mountain of understanding stands where once there was only a vague shape. Imagine a child sitting cross-legged beside a small fire. A kettle simmers at its edge. The smell of coffee drifts into the cool. The tents behind him are as dark as the horizon, black goat hair breathing in the night breeze with a soft sigh. His grandfather is near, his robe pulling around him like shadow, his hand steady as it points upward. The old man names a star the child will carry in memory for the rest of his life. He will carry it through winds and across plains and into 1,000 nights more, a single point in a sky of countless points, the one that does not move. The child does not interrupt. He simply looks, and then he looks longer, and then longer still, until the star is no longer just a brightness but a companion. So begins the first lesson: finding a way in the desert without roads or markers is not a trick. It is a relationship. By day, the sun gives a slow clock of shadows. By night, the sky unfolds a map without edges. The Bedouin grew fluent in both, not with clattering tools, but with a calm way of seeing. They learned to read the slant of light on a dune face, the grain of wind-rippled sand, the direction of a breeze that has traveled farther than any caravan. They learned the colors of the horizon, how pale becomes paler where morning will be, how night pulls deepest where west sighs into nothing. Yet, always, it is the stars they return to, because stars are time stitched into space. They are direction stitched into memory. Start with one star, Polaris. You cannot hurry it, cannot command it to glow brighter or closer. You can only locate it, honor it, and let its steadiness settle your own breath. Find the Big Dipper, its bowl, its handle. Let the two rim stars of the bowl draw a line, and follow that line across a slice of the night. There, Polaris, neither the brightest nor the largest, but the one that keeps its promise. The desert could roar, the dunes could shift, the winds could erase your footprints as soon as you lift your heel, but Polaris remains, unwilling to wander. Take a step. Take another. You are already less alone, now widen the lesson. Learn the belt that hunts across the south in winter. 3 stars in a row, even as a ruler's edge, marking a straight certainty in a world of curves. Learn the cluster. That looks like a soft mist until your eyes adjust. The Pleiades, the little flock, as faithful to season as your own pulse is to sleep. When it rises at a certain hour, a certain tilt, the elder murmurs, change is coming. And you believe him because the desert has never once contradicted the sky for long. Some nights the Milky Way arches like a pale road, a dusted ribbon of far suns. It tells you nothing in words, but it says everything with presence. That even when your path on the ground is invisible, a path above you is always there. The Bedouin would watch where that great brightness lifts and where it leans. Night after night, the arc becomes not a marvel but a measure, as reliable as the notch in a staff or the crease of a palm. The child will learn to match the curve of that light with the curve of his own route. You could not draw it on paper in a way that would make sense to someone who has not slept beneath it for years. But in the mind of one who has, it is a map. More accurate than any that folds. There are subtler anchors, too, the kind that do not announce themselves. A faint companion near a brighter star, a twin that sharp-eyed elders point out to test a pupil's patience. Do you see the small one, the one that many miss? An uncle may ask, and the boy will narrow his gaze, unfocus, refocus, let time lengthen, and then, there, it is, a small pearl stitched to a larger lamp. He smiles, not because he has passed a test, but because he has added one thread to the tapestry he is weaving in his mind, a tapestry of points and lines and rises and settings, of small certainties stitched across a moving world. By day, the lesson wears another face. It is not the glitter of the firmament but the geometry of light. Shadows shorten and lengthen. They pivot across the sand like compass arms. The Bedouin learned to watch the way a camel casts its silhouette. How, in late morning, the shadow slides away from the east, and in late afternoon it spills toward the east again. A stick in the ground, its shadow traced briefly, becomes a living dial. What a sailor finds in a sextant, a nomad finds in the fall of shade across his own hand. Noon is not a number. It is a hush in which shadows gather themselves under feet, and hooves and then begin their afternoon journey again. Wind is a teacher, too. Not a voice that shouts, but one that repeats itself for those who stay long enough to recognize a pattern. The northeast wind, Shamel, comes with a cool insistence. You feel it on your cheek. You watch it draw ripples along the skin of the sand. Dunes are not placed at random. They lean, they align, they confess the wind that sculpted them. Align. Of crescent-shaped dunes points as surely as any well-inked arrow, if you know which way the wind loves to push. A traveler pauses, reads the handwriting of the land, and moves again, not guessing, but consenting to what the desert is already telling him. Water, rare as a miracle, becomes an instrument in the lesson, though it is used carefully. The elder watches the dew beating on a cloth at dawn, watches where it gathers first, where the ground gives it back quickly, where the plants lean as if remembering underground veins that have not yet run dry. The child sees a line of tamarisk trees far off and thinks beauty. The elder sees a pulse of groundwater and thinks direction. Together, they learn the desert's second map, not the star map above, but the slow map below, drawn in roots and in shade and in the flight paths of birds that know where to stop. Travel happens when the heat is kind, at dawn, at dusk, at night. Boots crunch softly, then not at all, as sand deepens. Camels settle into their pace, deliberate, swaying steps that make the world feel like a cradle. The lesson asks for presence, not speed. You do not beat the desert, you keep company with it. The caravan moves as constellations do, steady, unhurried, across a river of darkness where the stars drift like boats made of fire. In the mind of the lead rider, lines connect points, that one to that one, now to that one, and a corridor opens. He does not announce it. He simply follows it, and those behind follow him, and those behind them follow the sound of bells hung from saddles, a silver conversation that says, "We are together, we are together." There will be nights when clouds curtain the sky and erase the ink of directions. The first lesson covers that. 2. Do not panic. Pay attention to what remains. Listen to wind. Measure its voice against what you knew before the sky went soft. Remember the last shore point you saw and the time it was overhead. Feel how the air cools, earlier in a season, later in a season, and let that be your calendar for a while. Look at the lay of the dunes beneath your feet. Feel which side gives and which side resists. The desert seems blank to the hurried. To the unhurried, it is annotated everywhere, and then there is the matter of stories. Knowledge without story is dry like a well gone to stone. The Bedouin fed their lessons with tales that woke the heart. A certain star would be called a hunter, another, a pearl lost by a queen. The band of stars across the night could be a river or a road or a vale, depending on the tribe, depending on the song. Venus might appear in the blue before dawn and be named as a herald. The child who learned those names did not just collect labels, he collected relationships. He did not just learn to point, he learned to belong. And belonging is a direction all its own. There are lines the eye can learn to measure without tools, a star's height above the horizon in hands, a trick as old as long arms and patient nights. Hold your fist at arm's length. Count how many fists lift the star above the line between earth and sky. Keep that count in your pocket the way modern travelers keep coordinates. The elder does not call it science or poetry. He calls it remembering, and remembering is the hinge on which survival quietly turns. Sometimes the lesson is failure, and this too the desert teaches with a merciful slowness. A young man follows what he thinks is the right line, but dawn surprises him with dunes he does not recognize. Pride flares like a spark, but pride is a poor compass. He sits, drinks, breathes, lets the camels rest. He watches how their heads tilt. Animals remember paths the mind forgets. He waits for evening rather than waste daylight strength, and when night returns, he finds Polaris again, strange only because he ignored it, familiar the moment he consents to it. He rises, adjusts, smiles to himself, and moves on, one step more certain than the last. The desert forgives this kind of error the way a good teacher forgives a wrong answer honestly given, with patience and with the same question asked again, softly, until the right answer settles of its own weight. In the second half of the night, when the cold is friend and not threat, when breath hangs like pale silk in the air, the sky teaches another quiet thing, that what rises also sets, that what is above you now will be behind you soon. That navigation requires not just aiming but letting go. A line of stars marks your east. Hours later, that same line marks your west. You do not argue with this. You adapt. The Bedouin did not cling to a single sign out of stubbornness. They held a cluster of signs lightly and moved with them as they turned. This looseness is not weakness. It is wisdom. A man who must have one answer will be lost in a land of many truths. A man who can listen to a chorus will find his melody sooner than he expects. Listen long enough, and the desert's first lesson unfolds into others that are not about direction at all. Patience, humility, companionship. Patience to wait for. The sky to clear rather than exhaust yourself in a straight line to nowhere. Humility to admit that a camel's instinct has a place at the council table of your mind. Companionship to share the small warmth of a fire and the larger warmth of trust, because a caravan is a moving constellation, each person a star, each star a person, the lines between them the invisible bonds that make the map complete. Point 1. Night, somewhere between here and the far edge of a map you cannot draw. A story is told so softly you might think it is only the wind. A caravan, long ago, moved under a sky with its familiar lamps veiled. The leader listened to the ground instead. He felt how the sand lay slanted under his right foot a little more than under his left. He tasted the air, found a memory of sultanate from a far distant dry lake. He watched a thin flock of birds make a line where the clouds had a seam. He followed that seam. Hours later, the clouds tore away like cloth, and the North Star looked down like an old friend. He nodded to it. He did not thank it aloud. He had already thanked the wind and the ground and the birds. He was not saved by a single sign, but by all of them together, gathered in a heart trained to hear whispers. That is the first lesson. 2. The world is generous with hints. A generous traveler survives. When dawn returns, because dawn always returns, the desert lifts its veil of silver and puts on gold. The tents wake with a rustle. The kettle speaks in its small, urgent tongue. The child rubs his eyes. The elder stretches a hand stiff from the night's cold. They speak little. The lesson belongs to the night that has just passed, and like all good lessons, it is already becoming instinct. The boy will not be able to say later exactly when he knew where north was. He will only know that he knows it, the way he knows. Where his own hand is when he closes his eyes. And this is the mark of true learning. What was once outside moves inside, and once inside, it does not need to be summoned with effort. It is simply there. Pack the tent. Balance the load. Check. The girth and the knots and the quiet moods of animals who carry more than their share and ask little in return. Step out. The land has not changed its mind. It is still 1,000 undulating sentences written in a language without ink. But you have changed. You have learned to read. You find the faintest line of a star, and even if day is too bright to hold it, its echo remains with you like music you heard in a dream. The desert looks the same. You are not the same, and as you move, you hear again that soft refrain that belongs to this life. The fire's crackle surrendering to ash, the bell's patient chime on a camel's breast, the hush of the wind combing the dunes, the old man's voice in memory pointing up. The child's answering silence opening like a door. The first lesson was never a single fact. It was a way of being with a world that does not shout. It was a consent to be taught by light and by darkness, by wind and by shade, by what endures, and by what passes. It was a promise you make each time you step out, to notice, to remember, to trust. When night returns again, as it always does, the map will open again, and the same teachers will take their places in the same quiet classroom. You will lift your face, and your breath will find their rhythm, and the road will be there, invisible to those who do not know how to look, shining to those who do. The desert whispers. The stars reply. And you move forward, steady as a constellation sailing a black sea. The desert teaches with a voice so soft that impatient ears mistake it for silence. Yet to the Bedouin, that silence is the richest library they will ever know. It has margins and chapters, prologues at dusk, epilogues at dawn. When the world grows quiet enough, the heart's rhythm slows to match the planet's unhurried turning, and what seemed empty becomes an atlas. The stars are its letters. The wind is its punctuation. And the intervals, the long, patient intervals, are where understanding takes root. Begin with the simplest posture of learning, stillness. A young apprentice lies upon a woven mat beyond the glow of the campfire so that his eyes may drink the dark without glare. His hands rest, palms open, as if to receive instruction that cannot be held. The elder does not speak at first. He lets the night settle around the boy like water around a stone. Only after several breaths, when the lad's shoulders loosen, and the last remnants of daytime hurry drain away, does the lesson begin. Without words, above them, the sky is vast, but not empty. It has a structure as patient as bone. The elder has taught the boy to find anchors, the bowl and handle that point to a northern promise, the three-stitch belt that leans cleanly across winter's torso, the tight cluster like a drop of milk, spilled upon velvet, rising and setting with the seasons. He has taught him to hold a fist at arm's length and count hands between a star and the horizon, to notice how that count changes through the night like a clock no one needs to. Wind. Each exercise is as soft as walking, and yet each calibrates a sense that cannot be purchased, only inherited. Listen, the elder finally says. The boy hears wind comb the dunes into ripples like the back of a sleeping animal. He hears a camel's slow sigh, the creak of leather, the tick of cooling stones. He thinks he has understood. No, the elder says, half smiling in the dark, for he remembers when his own teacher corrected him in the same gentle way. Listen. The command is not to the ears now, but to the whole body. The boy lets time lengthen until the boundary between his skin and the night feels thin. Something in him grows roomy. The mind that a moment ago was a room with shut shutters becomes a courtyard open to the sky. Into that courtyard, the elder allows the first story of the evening to enter, as soft as a guest. Once, he murmurs, we travelled 3 nights with the sky veiled. No single star looked down. We could have waited, but water was behind us, not ahead. The wind blew from the northeast, steady as prayer, writing its script on the dunes. We read its handwriting, the horns of the crescents, the shadowed lee, the long backs of the ridges. We watched our animals' ears, that slight turn when the air carries a scent of damp clay. We trusted the night's cool to carry far the sound of distant birds, late migrants cutting invisible paths to water. We followed what remained when the obvious had been taken away. When the clouds finally tore, there was the northern lamp, exactly where it should be, smiling as if nothing had happened. Clouded nights are tests the desert gives to measure whether a student is learning a language or merely copying a picture. The sky is a generous teacher, but the ground is, too. The boy has been coached to read ripples. Fine corrugations run perpendicular to the prevailing breeze. Crescents orient their open mouths downwind. Long, sharp slip faces betray which direction. Sand is pushed and which is sheltered. If the stars write a scripture in light, the dunes echo it in grains, and both can be read by those who sit long enough with both books open at once. The elder calls constellations by names the boy will one. Day whisper to his children, the little flock that marks the seasons. The hunter's waist, the faithful lantern above the northern rim, the southern herald that hugs the horizon when the year unclenches its heat. Some nights he uses old Arabic names, musical like water poured from a jug, Thuray for the small. Cluster that announces coolness, Suhail, low and lucid, as if the south itself were offering a sign, Old Jaws striding the winter sky, Aera with Macron shining with a brightness that can make a new student mistake brilliance for usefulness. Not the brightest, the elder reminds him, tapping the boy's shoulder toward the one that matters most for keeping a line, the steadiest. He tells stories because stories glue memory to meaning. A star alone is a pinprick, but a star inside a tail is a companion. The Milky Way is not only a smear of distant suns. It is a road the ancestors walked when the sand was new, a bridal veil unfurled across a night that wishes to be celebrated. When the boy learns that Suhail appears low and faithful to the south in certain seasons, he cannot help but feel that the compass points are not abstract, but inhabited, as if the directions themselves were elders whose counsel can be sought. They practice small, meticulous things. The elder asks the boy to close his eyes for 50 breaths, then open them and find the north again. He asks him to turn 3 times on his mat and point to the same bright cluster without peeking at the fire that might give away orientation. He moves the boy's mat a few paces one night and says nothing, watching to see whether the lad's inner compass begins to tug. These are not tricks. They're ways of placing a lodestone in the chest so that the iron filings of sensation align without strain. Sometimes the boy guesses. Sometimes he is correct. The elder praises the process, not the result, because the desert has taught him that results belong to fate, but processes belong to devotion. Diane, the second watch of the night, when breath is white in the air and the fabric of a tent stiffens with cold, the stars appear closer. The boy learns to feel their apparent motion not as spectacle, but as instrument. The belt drifts, the flock rises, the dipper tips its bowl. He learns that what leads will follow, and what follows will lead, a dance that repeats each clear night, so reliable that it can be trusted when thirst threatens to make reason brittle. If he can embody the cycle, he will not require constant explanation. The sky will have moved from being a map he consults to a pulse he keeps. He has learned the day script as well. The elder had once driven a short stick into hard ground and traced its shadow each hour, a pinwheel of lines that turned the sun into a clock face his grandson could touch. Later, they watched the camel's legs for the same knowledge. How under hoof at noon the shade pulls inward like a shawl to breastbone. How, later, it stretches as if yawning, pointing toward evening. They dipped their fingers in a bowl at dawn. To measure, due the way a patient measures the temperature of water for tea, learning how long the night had been cool enough to let breath condense, how far the air had drifted from damp places, and they have learned the uses of waiting, which is a subject seldom taught in schools with walls. Waiting is not doing nothing. It is letting the world finish its sentence. When sand moves in small hysteria and the sky has hidden its script, a hurrying traveler writes his own errors across the day. A Bedouin ties a little patience into his sash instead, sits in the lee of a dune, and gives the light a chance to compose itself. In that pause, things speak that did not have time to speak before, the faint grind of a salt flat far off, the flight line of gulls lost inland after a storm, the shiver of cold along the back of the wind that tells of a shallow depression where air has pulled. The elder once described silence not as an absence of sound, but as a presence that slides open doors locked to those who insist on speaking first. When you are quiet, he said, even the horizon grows comfortable enough to lean closer. The boy, who had laughed at this once, no longer laughs. He has watched with his own eyes how distance shortens when one refuses to chase it. On the rare nights when the moon is full and the stars recede into a softer chorus, another curriculum emerges. The dunes glow like the ribs of a sleeping leviathan. The world has edges again. The elder uses such nights to show the boy routes between landmarks that only exist by light this tender. A fishbone pattern in a dried wadi that points home. A shelf of rock whose shadow looks like a date palm from one angle and a sleeping hawk from another. The way tents themselves can serve as constellations, a moving pattern whose stars are people, whose lines are trust. Remember, he says, a caravan is also a sky. Keep your place in it and it will keep its promise to you. He tells one last story before the boy sleeps, because the mind, like the sand, holds shapes best when the wind is low. Years ago, the elder says, there was a youth who loved the Southern Herald and would not stop using it, even when wisdom demanded a different anchor. He drew a line too long from a star that never rose high in the latitude, and the earth corrected him with a lesson he survived only because old men and good animals walked beside him. A star is a guide, the elder said, not a flag. To die for. Be faithful to the sky, not stubborn to a single lamp. The boy stores this away. He is learning that devotion is best spent on truth, not on habit. When at last sleep takes him, the boy's last sight is of the faint cloud of the Milky Way, unfurling like a shawl across the world. He will dream of walking it without tiring, of tracing with his bare feet the same arc the flock of stars makes as it rises from the eastern rim. He will wake before dawn to the smell of coffee and the hush of men greeting morning like a companion who has come from far. He will rub sand from his lashes and, without thinking, turn his face north to make sure the sky still keeps its promises. It does. Dawn teaches, too. The eastern rim is pale, then peach, then the color of dates split open to sun. The elder points not up now but across, to a knuckled line of hills far away that the night had swallowed, to a dark seam where damp has darkened. The surface, good grazing after months of mean forage, to a silver slick where a sapka sleeps, beautiful but treacherous, endorsing a longer route for the sake of ankles and hooves. The sky is our teacher, he concedes, but it tutors the earth, and the earth is our exam. They pack with care that has the pace of prayer. Ropes hum under tension. Leather groans. A kettle is rinsed with the frugality of people who know the price of sweetness in a dry land. The boy lifts a sack, checks his knots, pats the thick neck of a camel who has taught him more patience than any person could. As they move, bells answer one another with small, agreeable voices. The caravan finds its cadence, a slow heartbeat across a body made of sand. The lesson once again returns to silence. They travel without wasteful talk. Words are not scarce, but attention is precious. They spend it as one spends water. When the heat climbs, they rest. When the heat declines, they rise. By evening, the sky is a book again, fresh, uncreased by the day's thumb. The elder lets the boy recite first, the anchors, the measures, the subtle companions. The youth points, counts, and softly names. He errs once. He corrects himself without embarrassment. The elder says nothing, which is the best kind of praise, and so this classroom without walls proves itself again. Stars as script, silence as teacher, patience as the desk on which one leans. The boy is not being trained to perform tricks. He is being invited to become porous to a world that never shouts, to be shaped by it in ways that make boasting impossible and survival likely. If he accepts the invitation, he will one day walk as the elder walks, without flourish, without fear, with an ease that makes the difficult seem simple. People will call it instinct. He will call it listening when night deepens and cold braids itself through the woven hair of tents. The elder and the boy share a last cup. They do not toast the heavens. They thank them by noticing them. Before sleep, the boy steps away from the fire and lifts his face. He says nothing. The sky says everything. Tomorrow, the lesson will be the same and entirely new. That is how learning works in the desert's cosmic classroom. Repetition so gentle it feels like grace. Variation so subtle it feels like being trusted. The stars keep their promises. The dunes keep their patterns. The wind keeps its handwriting. And between them all, a human keeps his way, not by conquering the vastness, but by consenting to be taught by something vaster still. The desert has no milestones, no carved roads, no rivers to bend around and guide the traveler. It is a canvas wiped clean with each gust of wind, dunes rewritten like words erased and scrawled again by an invisible hand. To cross such a land, without losing one's way, requires more than courage. It requires intimacy with the sky. For the Bedouin, that intimacy was deep, practiced not in books but in memory, sharpened not in schools but in campsites, each night a fresh lesson, each star a dependable friend. When the desert erased the earth signs, the heavens remained constant. Polaris, the North Star, stood steady above the horizon, the anchor of the northern sky. While the world below shifted in waves of sand, Polaris did not wander. To the Bedouin, this small, faint star was a lantern placed by God at the roof of the world, marking a direction that no storm or season could obscure. The caravan could march for nights unbroken, and as long as Polaris hovered unwavering above their left shoulder or right, they knew the path was true. It was not brightness that made Polaris valuable, it was fidelity. Stars like Sirius burned brighter, but their brilliance wandered. Polaris, modest but immovable, taught the lesson that loyalty outweighs spectacle, but Polaris was only one in a greater chorus. The belt of Orion, 3 straight lights stitched across the sky, was another teacher. In winter, when the nights grew long and the chill bit harder, the belt rose early in the east, a signal of the turning year. From its tilt, Bedouin eyes could discern direction. From its timing, they could measure the hour. Even children, before they could measure water for their camels, could look upward and know the desert's clock. Orion was not simply a hunter of myth but a signpost of practicality. Sirius, called Al-Shiare with Macron in Arabic, held another role. Its appearance in the dawn sky marked not only direction but season. The Bedouin watched for its heliacal rising, the moment it first reappeared, after weeks hidden in the sun's glare. This rising heralded the fierce heat of summer, a warning inscribed in fire. Migration patterns shifted with it. Camps moved toward grazing that could withstand the coming blaze, and water sources were rationed with greater care. To modern eyes, a star is decoration. To the Bedouin, Sirius was an alarm bell, another cluster. The Pleiades, or Alpha, shimmered like a handful of jewels scattered across the black velvet. When it vanished from the sky in the late spring, Bedouin knew that the worst heat was approaching. Its reappearance, many weeks later, promised the gradual return of cooler days and a more merciful season. Thus, Alpha was not only a pretty sight for poets but a calendar for shepherds and nomads. Even in love songs, its presence or absence hinted at time cycles. For hearts and journeys both are bound to seasons. The Milky Way itself, Ol Darb ol Laban, the path of milk, was more than a ribbon of stars. It was a road written across the heavens, a cosmic highway. To caravans trudging beneath, it echoed their own lines of march. By following its arc, a traveler could ensure he was not straying too far from his course. Its tilt across the horizon whispered of directions. Its shifting prominence hinted at the time of night. For those who carried no ink or parchment, this river of light was a map unrolling above them, renewed each evening without fail. Bedouin oral tradition bound all this knowledge into memory with poetry. A grandfather, leaning near the fire, might recite, "Follow the steadfast one, he will not betray. Trust the cluster's silence, it hides the day. When the bright dog rises, the heat will slay. Walk with the milk road and find your way." Such verses carried not only rhythm but direction. The rhyme etched the lesson into young minds, ensuring that when they were alone, walking in dark silence, the memory would surface like a lantern. These were not academic mnemonics, but lifelines. In the desert, forgetting could mean more than embarrassment. It could mean thirst, and so the Bedouin became celestial cartographers, mapping not with ink upon vellum, but with starlight upon the soul. Their atlas could not be rolled or stolen. It was carried within, inherited across generations, secured by song and strengthened by silence. Each star had its use, each cluster its meaning, and together they composed a system more elegant than any man-made tool, because it was written in the very structure of the universe. To sit with them under that boundless dome was to see how humanity once read the world. Not with devices that needed charging, not with compasses bound to needles, but with eyes open, hearts attentive, and a memory tied to poetry. The sky was not distant, it was intimate, as close as breath. And in this intimacy, the desert became not a void, but a place inscribed with guidance, waiting only for those who knew how to read. The desert is a page that the wind keeps erasing. Dunes shift their sentences. Tracks dissolve between one breath and the next. In a land that forgets its surface so quickly, a traveler needs a memory that cannot be rubbed away. The Bedouin grew such a memory by tying it to what cannot be moved by weather or whim, the sky. There, time and direction are written in lights that repeat themselves with the calm insistence of prayer. Night after night, season after season, the same chorus returns, and in that repetition the Bedouin found not only beauty, but instruction. As practical as a water skin and as necessary as shade. They began with a simple truth: stars move in patterns, and patterns can be read. Some stars rise and set, others circle a pole and never fall below the horizon. Some flash into dawn after weeks of hiding in the sun's blaze. Some announce themselves high and early in the cold months and then withdraw, giving the stage to another cast. All of it, every appearance, every disappearance, every tilt and turn, can be turned to use. Time from starlight a night in the open is not a single darkness, it is a sequence. Twilight softens, the first stars appear, the sky deepens, constellations migrate, the arc of the Milky Way rolls like a slow tide, the cold gathers, then loosens, and finally the east begins to pale. The Bedouin divided this sequence into watches, and they set these watches by sky signs as confidently as a sailor sets a watch by bells. So if you asked an elder, "What time is it?" he might point to Orion's belt grazing the eastern horizon, and say, "Early still," or to Alpheus, the Pleiades, high at the middle of the night, and say, "Half the long hours have passed." As the night ages, the belt climbs, the flock tilts westward, the dipper pours its bowl, the lantern of Polaris sits where it always sits, and a practiced I can tell the hour by these phrases as easily as by any marked dial. There are ways to turn this poetry into physical measure. Stretch an arm, close one eye, hold your fist so the knuckles face you. That height, at arm's length, covers roughly 10 degrees of sky. Count how many fists lift a chosen star above the horizon. At the start of evening it may be 1. Deep in the night it may be 5. Bedouin children learned early which star to count and how many fists mark the middle of the night in a given season. It is not a number written on parchment. It is a number written in bones and breath, repeated enough nights, and the body knows. The moon adds another clock hand. It is a calendar hanging at arm's reach. Waxing and waning, it divides the month into clean halves. Its height at a familiar hour tells where the dawn is near. Its shape tells where you stand in the month's river. A thin crescent at sunset is a beginning. A plump, high moon at midnight is the fullness the poets love and the shepherds quietly curse, for it washes out the smaller lights. Even so, bright moonlight has its uses. It turns the dune's ribs to silver, reveals dry gullies, and shows a safer line between salt pans. The Bedouin did not prefer one sky over another. They learned the advantages of each. Direction that does not drift direction, in the day, is a theatre of shadows. A stick planted in firm ground is a teacher that never tires. When the sun is low, its shadow stretches. When the sun is high, the shadow draws inward. Watch the shadow swing through noon and you watch South mark itself on the ground. A camel's legs do the same work as the stick. At mid-morning the shadow leans one way, at mid-afternoon the other. A glance at your own feet will tell you what a compass would, where the sun is, where you are in the day, which way the world is turning, but night is the masterclass, and the first lesson is Polaris. The Bedouin honored its modesty. It is not the brightest star, but it keeps its promise. Find the Big Dipper's bowl, trace the 2 rim stars outward. There, a short hop across the darkness, is the still lamp. Fix it, and north fixes itself. Fix it, and east and west become the edges of your awareness even if the ground is a sameness of curves. When clouds blind that lamp, the sky still keeps a contract. Circumpolar stars, those that wheel around Polaris without setting, sketch. Circles that can be read by their slope. A practiced eye knows where the wheel would center even if the hub is veiled. Farther south, a different method answers. Watch the rising and setting points of reliable stars. Orion's belt, when it lifts straight from the eastern dunes, stamps east upon the world. When that same belt leans towards sleep in the west, west is not a direction but a posture, a bowing away from the night. Sirius, Ulster with Macron, flashes a bright tooth low in the southeast in winter. Follow it up and westward through the hours, and the desert redraws its axes under your feet without need of ink. Even the soft river of the Milky Way serves as a compass for those who have slept beneath it long enough. In autumn nights it leans one way, by spring it arches another. Its angle against the horizon, recalled with the body's quiet arithmetic, keeps a caravan from drifting. Walk with the milk road. An elder might murmur to a boy, counsel that sounds like metaphor until the boy has followed that pale band for several nights and found himself precisely where he hoped to be. Seasons written in rising and setting migration is not whim, it is choreography. The herd eats one place thin, rains tempt grass elsewhere, old wells fail and others remember their water, winds shift, and with them the comfort of a camp. The sky gives early notice of these changes. Alpheus. The small, tight cluster is a shepherd's calendar. Its disappearance into the sun's glare signals that the year is sliding toward its hottest days. Its reappearance in the pre-dawn tells of the long heats beginning to loosen its fist. Families remember when to move by this jewel's yearly vanishing act. Markets and marriages have been planned around it for centuries. When the flock of stars returns to the dark before sunrise, people speak of cooler nights the way they speak of dear friends returning from a journey. Sirius announces heat with dangerous accuracy. It's Heliacal rising, the first morning it is. Visible again in the dawn after weeks lost to sunlight, rings like a warning bell. The Arabic poets tied it to thirst and trial. The Bedouin tied it to rationing and earlier travel hours. Camps pull closer to known water, herds are walked while the night still owns the air, and long halts are made in midday shade so the body salt is not squandered in bravado. Farther south, low and patient, Canopus, Suhail, blinks into the horizon in late summer and autumn for those latitudes that can see it. Its return is not heat's trumpet but its gentle tapering. It is a southern anchor and a calendar note written in a quieter hand. To sight Suhail is to feel the year turning. Its great wheel, bringing different winds, different grazings, different stories to the fire's edge. Other beacons play their parts. Scorpius, sprawling and unmistakable, rides the late spring and summer sky. When its heart, Antares, fires low in the south, every throat remembers to sip slowly, and every elder remembers salt for the young. Arcturus dips westward in early autumn evenings. Fomalhaut, bright and solitary, watches the fall like a patient sentinel rising in the southeast. None of these are mere ornaments. Each is a paragraph in a manual that no single person wrote and that everyone can read if they are willing to look up long enough. When the sky hides, reading what remains the desert is generous, but it is also stern. There are nights when clouds seal the roof, when dust turns the air to paste, when the moon is a smudged coin and the stars do not sign their names. On such nights, ignorance is loud, wisdom whispers, wait. The Bedouin learned a discipline of delay. The best direction is sometimes the pause, but delay is not always possible, and even then the world is not silent. Wind writes on sand, learn it. Handwriting. Crescent dunes open their mouths downwind. Their steep faces point the way the sand is falling. Fine ripples run across the dune's skin perpendicular to the breeze. Follow the grain of those ripples, and you are following the memory of air. Plants tell tales. Tamarisk gather near water. Veins. A darkening of soil hints at a basin that collects dew. A lone palm declares a story you should heed. Birds cut lines across the dusk toward places where a traveler might live to be old. Camels remember paths the mind forgets. Their heads turn ever so slightly toward routes they have walked before. All of this is part of the sky's instruction, because the sky teaches the earth, and the earth repeats the lesson in another dialect. Turning starlight into habit, the most practical knowledge is the knowledge you no longer need to argue with yourself about. The Bedouin turned techniques into habits so deep they could be practiced even when tired, even when worried, even when conversation and chores webbed through the night. A boy learns the fist measure not as a clever trick but as a nightly game with his grandfather. Count the fists to Ulthuré after dinner. Count again when the embers are low. Count again before sleep. In a week, the numbers are a song he can hum without thinking. A girl is shown the dipper's two-rimmed stars and how to walk that pointer across the darkness to the steady lamp. She is asked to lift her face at different hours to see how far the imaginary line reaches now, how close to a nearby faint marker it passes. With each repetition, the geometry of the night grows roots in her, and someday, when worry crowds her mind thin and the dunes have erased every helpful mark, the arm and eye will do the work without asking permission from a nervous brain. Even timekeeping becomes a body sense. In one season, Orion's belt clears the eastern edge just after the kettle sings. In another, it stands already high when the last story is told. In the cold months, it leans toward the west when the camels are groaning themselves to their knees. These associations slice the night into reliable pieces without a word being spoken. A man rolling from his mat and glancing upward knows whether he should wake the boy on his watch, whether the travelers who asked for company should be nearing. The agreed meeting June, whether he has slept too long. No clock face needed. No quarrel about numbers. The sky's repetition has become his own. Migration as choreography with the sky. When to fold a tent is a question of many voices. Wind, pasture, rumor of raids, the health of mothers and newborns, but the sky speaks early and steadily, and wise ears give it the first word. The Pleiades' last evenings above the western horizon, shimmering at dusk before vanishing into the sun. This is a curtain call. It announces a stretch of weeks when the desert asks for respect beyond what bravado is willing to grant. Families that listen begin the slow work of moving closer to generous wells, of trading salt and dates before heat makes tempers brittle and beasts surly. Months later, when that small flock reappears in the blue before dawn, there is a sigh across the camp, some relief, some anticipation. Routes open. Nights lengthen just enough to allow a few more miles in coolness. Suhail's appearance for those far enough south adds a second voice to the chorus, low and steady, and elders hum in agreement. Animals feel it too, the way they begin to rise. A little earlier, settle a little faster, chew more quietly as if some conversation is being resumed. This choreography is not a schedule pinned to a board. It is a pact with a sky that has never missed an appointment. The Bedouin honor the pact with an attention that looks like devotion because, in truth, it is devotion. Devotion to life made possible across distances that would otherwise be impossible. The result is a migration that feels less like flight and more like breathing. Out, in, away, back, dispersal, gathering. The sky leads each movement with a silent hand. The dignity of accuracy practical knowledge does not blush at being precise. A traveller who can say, at the second watch, when Althuré stands 3 fists above the east, we will pass the dry wadi with the split rock, is a traveller who protects the people who follow him. A grandmother who can say, when they bright dog star first claws the dawn, save the animal's breath, walk in the cool or not at all, is a grandmother who lengthens lives with a sentence. A girl who can point to the dipper and find the north without spectacle is a girl who will never feel alone in a place that makes many feel small. This is why, in the Bedouin's cosmic classroom, awe and utility were never enemies. The same star. That makes a poet whisper makes a caravan safer. The same cluster that fills a song with longing tells a herder when to break camp. The same river of light that makes a child reach out her hand in wonder keeps a grandfather's line straight. Under a new moon. Beauty and use, like night and dawn, take turns and share the sky, and so a traveller, pushing gently through the hour when breath turns to steam and the ground crunches beneath his sandals, lifts his eyes for a small confirmation, Polaris where it should be, the milk road sloping as it should slope, the belt marching toward the place it will cross the meridian. He does not announce his findings. He simply angles his shoulder the width of a thought and continues. Behind him, bells talk to bells on the camels' necks in that patient silver voice caravans carry. Beside him, a younger walker watches his face, then the sky, then the face again, learning to match both. Ahead, the desert looks as blank as ever to those who do not know how to see. To those who do, it is annotated everywhere. B why the time camp is made and the kettle sings and the stories start. The night has already been accounted for with quiet arithmetic. The stars have paid their wages in directions and hours. The people have paid their part with attention and humility. Tomorrow, the same exchange will happen again, with different details, with the same fidelity. The sky will keep its side of the pact. The Bedouin will keep theirs. And somewhere between those two keeping acts, a line of human beings will cross an ocean of sand without leaving a map behind, because the map is above them, and because the map is now within them. The hardest knowledge to keep is the kind that must travel without paper. A city can shelve its memory on walls of books. A caravan must pack its memory into voices. In the desert, where a gust redraws the ground and firelight is the only lamp, the Bedouin learned to make sound their archive. They stitch directions into verse, seasons into proverbs, star paths into chants that moved with the slow sway of camels. In this way, astronomy became melody, and navigation became a story you could hum. Silence remained the first teacher, but after silence came rhythm. Hooves fell in patient sequence, kettles hissed, the wind combed dunes in an even hand. The Bedouin listened, and then matched their voices to that steadying beat. The result was memory that could not be lost in a storm, a library you could sing, names that carry meaning, so they stay. A name that pictures a thing is easier to keep. That is why the elders wrapped stars in images. A few of the names they favored: Al-Najm Ash-Shamil, the northern star, Polaris not the brightest, but the still one, its virtue folded into its title. Al-Jawz, Orion a striding figure, so you remember its belt as a ruler's straight edge and its feet as signposts. On the horizon. Al-Thuray, the Pleiades a little abundance, a tiny cluster like a handful of bright seeds, seed time and season tucked into a name. Ad-Daban, Aldebaran the follower, trailing the Pleiades west, its very name reminds you of their dance. Kalb al-Akrab, Antares the scorpion's heart, hot and red. When it beats low in the south, the year itself feels fevered. Suhail, Canopus a gentle southern lamp. Low, faithful, seasonal, your tongue softens for it, so your mind does, too. Asher with Macron, Sirius bright, the scorching one, its dawn rising a warning braided into its name. Rigel al-Jawz and Ib al-Jawz, Rigel and Betelgeuse. Orion's foot and armpit, a body map you can point to across the sky. Fum al-T, Fomalhaut the fish's mouth, lonely, lucid, an autumn sentinel easy to recall. Names like these are not mere labels, they are hooks. Each hook snags a memory, direction, season, caution. Spoken aloud, they make a little picture. That keeps returning when the sky is blank in the mind. Couplets you can walk by instruction became couplets, tight and balanced, so a boy riding a camel could say one line with an in-breath and the next with an out-breath. The camel sets the tempo, the memory rides it. Follow the steadfast lamp, north does not tire. When the dog star claws the dawn, cool your fire, count the little flock by fists, midnight is near. When Suhail kisses the rim, autumn draws near. If the dipper pours to the west, rest where you stand. If Orion rises straight, east is your hand, nothing complicated, just a handful of lines braided to direction and hour. The trick lies in repetition. Walk it, sing it, sleep it. One day you no longer recite it at all. You simply do it. Story maps. Because a map you love is a map you keep. They told navigation as stories because stories have rooms where details can live. An elder would draw a shallow arc in the sand with a date palm rib and begin from Ad-Daban, the follower, chasing Al-Thuray. We cross the empty valley to the north. When the belt of Al-Jawz stands upright, we are at the long ridge. Like a sleeping camel. Turn the width of a hand toward the milk road. See how it slopes? Walk with that slope until Fum al-T sits low like a cup left on the floor. There, water sits where sun cannot find it. Each image nests another, follower and flock, belt and ridge, milk road and cup. A string of beads you can finger in. The dark call and response, so everyone carries a piece. Memory is stronger if it's shared. Around a low fire, you might hear, where is north when the bowl is full? Under the star that will not move. What does the little flock say at dawn? Cool follows heat. Walk early, walk well. When the scorpion shows his heart. Sip, save, and shade, summer's oath. This is not a quiz to shame a child. It is a net. Each answer ties a knot. The net, once tied enough, times, will hold you when the night is busy with cloud. Games you can play while the kettle sings. Games turn fear into practice. The kettle murmurs, the children gather. The old men pretend not to listen. 3 turn north. Spin the child gently 3 times on a mat. Stop him. Ask for the north by pointing to the steady lamp. Points for finding it without checking the fire shadows. 5-fist pledge. Pick. A bright marker. Say, Al-Thuray. Count its height in fists just after dinner. Again when the embers are low. Again before sleep. Say the numbers like a little staircase. 1, 3, 5. Next night, check. The sky keeps its own staircase. Belt and paw. The child must recite, eyes closed, belt rising, east, belt leaning, south, dipper pouring, west, lamp quiet, north, and then open his eyes and point. It looks like play. It is play. But it is also habit building, kind that remains when thirst makes the mind thin, lullabies that fold seasons into sleep. Mothers folded the calendar into songs. A sleeping infant hears Althurain not as astronomy but as comfort, little flock, little light, hide and bring back cool night. When you vanish, we will stay. When you glimmer, we will stray dot or in the heat, bright dog at the morning's rim. Quieter steps till day grows dim, shade like a shawl, water like prayer. Summer is stern, be soft and spare. The child will not remember the words, but he will remember the shape of them, the way the names sit where the season sits. Years later, the shape will return as good judgment. Proverb bundles that travel short sayings knitted the long lessons tight, not the brightest, the steadiest. Polaris over spectacle. The earth forgets, the sky repeats. Trust, the nightly pattern. Follow the follower. Aldebaran trails the Pleiades. Let one sign lead to the next. Clouds veil the roof, but the floor speaks. If stars hide, read wind, sand, plants. Drink at memories well before you thirst. Rehearse before you need the skill. Each proverb is a handle. Grab any handle you can when the night is slippery, weaving voice to footstep, the camel's metronome. A camel's long stride has a lull of its own. The rider's breathing eases into it, so do the lines. Bedouin to Gruda, the riding chant, keeps. Distance and direction in a single frame, north lamp steady, shoulder like a keel, milk road leaning, hold the left hand feel. Little flock climbing, half the night is gone, belt straight rising. East will carry us on dono flourish, no chorus, just a 4-beat truth that moves with the animal. A mile later, repeat. 10 miles later, you won't need to, drawing the sky on sand at halts, elders copy the heavens on the ground. A heel scuffs a horizon, a twig marks the dipper, 3 date pits become Orion's belt, a handful of fine sand is pinched and sprinkled, a dusting for the Milky Way. They let the boy walk the drawing as if it were real, step from belt to lamp, from follower to flock. In the morning, wind will erase the drawing. Good. The lesson is not meant to survive there. It is meant to survive here. A tale of forgetting and the quiet rescue. Stories carried warnings in velvet. One, told softly, a young man loved names more than meanings. He could list more stars than the old men, and it pleased him. But one night the names deserted him. Cloud came, hunger came, pride came last. He had forgotten the simple rule. When the roof is veiled, ask the floor. He had never learned the sand's handwriting. He walked in circles of language. The camels remembered better. They leaned their necks toward an old path. He finally listened. When the cloud lifted, the lamp was where it had always been. He thanked the stars, but he also thanked the wind. And the animals. After that, his lists became stories again. The moral does not scold. It says, keep breadth with depth, keep sky with earth, keep words with attention. Teaching that turns into instinct you can hear the arc of a good pedagogy. In the camp, call and response in the evening. A game by the kettle, a chant in the saddle, a proverb tossed like a date to a boy's laughing mouth, a drawing on sand, then the quiet. Always the quiet afterward, in which the night binds the lesson. What begins as mnemonic ends as instinct. The fist measure becomes the body's metronome. The dipper's pointer becomes a whisper you hear even when your eyes are wet with wind. The little flock's rising becomes a soft bell you hear before the stars clear the lip of the world. When a thing settles this deeply, you can stand in a place that looks like everywhere and still know exactly where you are, and so the Bedouin, celestial cartographers with no parchment to their name, kept a precise, portable atlas. They carried it in names that picture, verses that breathe, proverbs that grip, drawings the wind erases and the mind preserves, games that make skill into play, and chants that pace a caravan's miles. They did not fear the desert's habit of forgetting, because they answered it with a habit stronger than forgetting, remembering together night after night, generation after generation, the same songs found the same stars in the same sky. The wind erased the map from the ground, the voices restored it above, and then within. The desert, to an unfamiliar traveler, looks like a blank page. Dune after dune, the same waves of sand, a horizon that repeats itself until the mind grows dizzy. Yet to the Bedouin, this emptiness was never empty. It was a book, written in subtle strokes, its chapters unfolding with every gust of wind, every tilt of dune, every track left by hoof or paw. Where others saw monotony, they saw text. Where others heard silence, they heard a low murmur of instructions. The wind was one of their most trusted guides. Each season carried its own prevailing breath. The north wind, Shamal, was dry and cool, bringing clarity to the sky. The south wind, Kibble, was heavy and hot, pressing against the lungs and painting the air with dust. To a Bedouin traveller, the feel of the wind on the cheek or the whistle of its passage through tent ropes was more than sensation. It was a compass. They knew how to tilt their bodies, how to angle their camels, how to predict which dunes would shift and which would stand firm by knowing the character of the wind. Even at night, when stars vanished behind clouds, the wind remained, pressing against the face like a gentle but insistent hand, pointing direction when the heavens refused. Sand itself spoke with a quiet but certain voice. Dunes were not random piles, but organized structures sculpted by centuries of wind. Their crests often lay at predictable angles, forming long ridges that aligned with prevailing currents. A Bedouin, riding at dawn when shadows sharpened, could read the lay of dunes as clearly as a mariner reads waves. The slip face of a dune, its steep, sheltered side, always fell leeward, away from the wind's origin. Thus, the desert itself became a compass rose, its vast ridges pointing the way, each dune and needle tilted by invisible hands. Even the ground beneath feet and hooves held messages. A surface rippled with small crescents of sand indicated one direction of wind. Hardened flats showed the passage of ancient floods. In low valleys, where shrubs clung, roots told of hidden moisture. A darkened patch of earth hinted at dew gathering before dawn. The Bedouin's eyes, trained from childhood, did not merely glance. They scanned, paused, compared, and remembered. Every shift of tone or texture was filed in memory. Every journey became an accumulation of these subtle observations, a map. Not on parchment, but in the senses. Animals, too, served as messengers. Camels, of course, had their own memory for routes, often lowering their heads toward a familiar trail even when men hesitated. The Bedouin did not scold this instinct. They respected it. They learned to watch their camel's unease, to notice when ears pricked at a distant end of water or when hooves pressed more eagerly into a slope that promised grazing. Wild creatures carried messages as well. The flight of birds, especially in morning hours, hinted at water sources or oases. Ant trails led toward shaded cracks where moisture lingered. Fox tracks crossing a dune suggested nearby burrows and the faint chance of springs hidden beneath. Each sign, minute, and forgettable to others, was a syllable in the Bedouin's language of the land. The sun, harsh as it was, offered more than heat. By the arc of its shadow, measured against a spear thrust into the sand, time could be told. Direction confirmed. Clouds, rare but powerful, formed in ways that hinted at seasonal rains far away. The air's taste, its dryness or faint saltness, spoke of proximity to desert basins or distant seas. To the untrained, these impressions were random sensations. To the Bedouin, they were pieces of a grand puzzle, all aligned with one another. The genius of their navigation was not in treating stars, winds, or dunes as separate teachers, but in weaving them into one fabric. If stars were hidden by cloud, the dunes still whispered. If dunes were distorted by storms, the wind's touch remained. If wind fell calm, a camel's instinct stepped forward. This layering of knowledge was resilience itself. No single sign ruled the journey. All signs cooperated, like instruments in a quiet orchestra. Consider a caravan moving in winter. Clouds obscure the stars, and night stretches long. The leader feels the shamal on his cheekbone, cool and unwavering, a reminder of the north. His eyes pick out dune crests slanting consistently, their slip faces confirming the wind's story. A camel raises its head, nostrils flaring toward a valley known for hidden wells. The leader nods, not to the men, but to the harmony of these guides. Direction is not a matter of guessing, but of listening. Each element supports the other, forming a chain strong enough to carry lives across the most merciless terrain. This was Bedouin ingenuity, not the invention of tools made of metal or glass, but the cultivation of human perception until the desert itself became an ally. Their science was not etched in diagrams but rehearsed in footsteps. Their compass was not housed in brass but in breath, bone, and instinct. Each journey proved again that survival in emptiness depends not on overpowering nature, but on hearing its whispers. In the world of the Bedouin, ingenuity wasn't loud. It did not glitter like polished brass, nor click like complicated gears. It lived in simple things used well, things you could carry in a sleeve or remember in your bones. A straight stick, a length of cord, a few knots, a pebble, a line scratched on wood, a strip of cloth that moved when wind moved. Their brilliance was not in inventing 1,000 tools, but in learning one tool 1,000 ways and knowing when to put it down. And listen to the desert itself. The first instrument was the same staff a traveler leaned on. Plant it upright in firm sand and it becomes a nomad, a shadow teacher. In the morning, the shadow is long and points west. As the sun climbs, the shadow shortens, swivels, and at true noon it tucks close to the staff. By afternoon it stretches east. With patience and 2 small marks, the Bedouin could make an east-west line on the ground, trace a circle around the staff's base, note where the tip of shadow meets the circle in the morning, wait, note where it meets again in the afternoon. A line between those 2 points is east-west, and a line perpendicular to it is north-south. No metal, no magnet, just light, shadow, and time agreeing. If clouds veiled the sky, the stick still remembered yesterday's lines from the same staff, another modest genius, shadow height as a clock. A notch nicked into the wood, here the shadow at dawn, another notch, here at mid-morning, a third, here when coffee finishes its small, urgent singing. Each notch is nothing by itself. Together, they become a household chronometer. You don't stare at it. You glance, the way you glance at a friend and know whether he is ready to move tonight. The staff could become a star ladder. Bedouin boys would lay it on the ground and scratch little lines where a known star sat above the horizon at familiar hours in a familiar season. Later, propped beside a saddle and held at a fixed arm's length, that same staff gave a rough check. Is Althuré, the Pleiades, as high as the 3rd mark yet? Then midnight is leaning close. It was never about absolute numbers. It was about consistency, a personal instrument calibrated by repetition and trust. Sometimes the tool was nothing but a cord and a knot. Arab seafarers on the Indian Ocean used the kamal, a small board and knotted cord, to hold a star at a fixed height and thus keep a latitude. Desert people did not need latitude the way sailors did, but a pared-down idea traveled inland, a cord, measured to the span between nose and outstretched hand, with a knot where Polaris sat when one stood at a beloved oasis. On long journeys, north or south, a quick check against that knot told the traveler whether he had drifted higher or lower than the memory of home. Not a rule, never a ruler that scolds, but a sanity check, quiet and portable, as humble as a prayer string counting. Mattered, but you could not always spare a scribe's tablet. So counting lived in small things. A misbaha, a string of beads used for prayer, could also pace a day. Every 10 beads a short halt, every full circle a long rest, each small cluster a watch of the night. Not as a strict order, but as rhythm. You can touch. When thirst and heat thin the mind, fingers still know how to move from bead to bead. Wind asked for a tool that could feel. A traveler might tie a narrow strip of cloth, a tassel, a tuft of wool, to his staff or the front of a camel saddle. In soft air, it hung like quiet grass. Under a steady shammel it lifted and pointed, repeating the same small answer long. After the ear forgot it. Set against the memory of dune alignment and the angle of ripples underfoot, a piece of cloth became a wind vane with a human pulse. There were sand compasses that left no trace. With the heel, a quick circle. With a palm, rib, a straight line. A pebble for Polaris. 3 date pits for Orion's belt. A pinch of sand sifted in a thin arc for the Milky Way. Elders walked children around these little maps as if walking them around the real sky, east to west, up to down, while the kettle whispered. By morning a breeze erased the lesson, which was perfect. The map wasn't meant to live on the ground. It was meant to move inward. Even the coffee kettle became a kind of metronome. The first thin hiss, stars just bright enough for close work. The small boil, time to check a reading before the flame is lowered. The long quiet afterward, embers and story, a steady hour for recitation and remembering. It was never a clock. It was a cue in the larger theatre of night. On the move. The body itself was instrument. Bedouin learned hand and fist angles. A fist at arm's length, 10 degrees of sky. A fingertip, 1 degree, and turned them into steps, watches, and choices without ceremony. They counted paces to the rise where you could finally see the long wadi. They counted breaths to the next patch of shade. A camel bell, hung at a certain height, chimed a soft rhythm. Set your stride to it and distance became a song instead of a worry. Animal behavior was its own toolkit. A rider felt a camel's neck lean toward an old well before his eyes could remember it. He watched birds at first light, their lines cutting toward water the way a child cuts toward a mother. He learned, quietly, to read an ant's straight insistence away from hot open ground into the small miracles of shade and damp. Tool and technique blurred into attention, which is the most durable device any human carries. Sometimes the most useful instrument was a memory marked on something cheap. A worn strap inked with 4 short lines, the heights of 4 stars at. A favored camp in 4 seasons. A scratch made with a nail on the inside of a wooden bowl. A tiny notch for the shadow length that signals pack now. A few pebbles in a pouch. 1 pebble dropped in a pocket for each hour traveled in the cool before dawn, so that at the day's halt, when people ask, "How far?" you answer not with pride, but with pebbles you can count. There were techniques. That lived halfway between craft and prayer. On the 2 days each year when the midday sun passes directly over Mecca, the direction of the Qibla anywhere in Arabia can be found by noting where a vertical object's shadow points at that exact time. Bedouin did not need astronomy tables to feel the dignity of this method. News of the day spread, elders kept the hour by shadow, and the resulting line was a double gift, devotion and orientation drawn by the same light. In later centuries. Some travelers carried a magnetic compass, a gift that traveled across half the world to reach them. Bedouin respected it, used it, set it beside the old methods, but they did not forget that a small iron needle is still one voice in a council, subject to quirks that a sky never indulges. The compass was welcomed as helper, not enthroned as king. A favorite field trick was the shadow circle on a day when moving sun made it useful to reset bearings. Scratch the circle, mark the morning shadow tip, wait, mark the afternoon twin. Children loved this because it felt like a game with the sun. Elders loved it because it made east-west certain when clouds later might tease away the clarity. Another trick, at twilight, when the horizon is clean, sight along the top line of a dune. Its continuous edge, wind-made, will usually parallel the prevailing breeze. Combine that with the cloth tough's answer and the ripple's orientations underfoot, and you've built a 3-point compass from air and sand. For season and weather, there were rough but reliable Anwar practices, the observance of star risings and settings and their relationships to wind and rain. Not prophecy, not superstition, an old, careful noticing. When Al-Thuray is last seen just after sunset, heat will ask you to be smaller. When Suhail, Canopus, stands low and clear, nights will be kinder, and some winds will turn polite. You could challenge the saying once or twice, but the desert's memory is longer than a man's. The wiser choice was to let the pattern teach you, and then there were the tools for confusion, for when the desert was busy hiding itself. A calm mind is a crafted instrument. Bedouin made it on purpose. Before choosing a course, the leader might insist on quiet, no chatter, just a minute of shared breathing. He would ask 2 different people, separately, to take a bearing by their own habit, one by wind feel, one by dune faces, another by a quick star sight if the roof of the night allowed it. If 2 agreed, the third could sleep. If they differed, no one was ashamed. They simply waited the few minutes the desert often needed to finish a sentence. This is the pattern everywhere. Modest objects plus attentive senses plus patience equals precision. The achievements were not dramatic, and perhaps that is why they lasted. A staff, a cord, a cloth, a handful of marks, each would mean little in a glass case. In a hand that knows, they mean arrival, and arrival, in a land that erases footprints, is the only proof that matters. Picture a winter march when stars are shrouded by cloud and the chamois bites clean. The sheikh plants his staff, draws a circle, waits, marks twin points, draws his line, east to west, plain as a seam. A young rider bows his head and feels. The winds settle against his cheek. A woman's fingers move along a misbaha, 10 beads before the next rise, then a rest in the lee. A camel lifts its muzzle toward a familiar basin. Pebbles click in a pouch. 3 hours since the last deep. Drink. A strip of cloth stands at an angle that repeats itself minute after minute. No single certainty, but a bundle of them, braided. When the cloud thins, a small star will wink in the north where they expect it. They won't cheer. They will simply nod. Sky has agreed with Earth again, and keep walking die in a different season. On a moon-bright night, the dunes glow like rib bones under a great pale skin. The stars are fewer, but the land is generous with edges. The staff shadow draws its neat bow on sand. The old strap bears its 4 small notches, and the heights match. The kettle sings, and that song is its own hour. Someone sprinkles sand in a slow arc to show a child where the milk road would lean if the moon weren't washing it away. The child will remember the gesture long after the sand is flat again. Tools like these thrive because they don't argue with the desert. They join it. They take what the world is already doing and make it legible to human hands. A star needs no permission to keep its place. A shadow needs no order to point its way. A breeze needs no tutoring to reveal itself in a thread of cloth. Bedouin genius was to accept these gifts without vanity, to combine them without fuss, and to teach them without hoarding. What you carry, then, is very little. Some cord, a staff, a few knots, a habit of making marks. But what you know is very large, and it travels easily. At day's end, when tents are pinned and fire is coaxed, the tools slip back into the ordinary. The staff is a lean against. The cord is a tie. The beads are a prayer. The pebble pouch is a toy for a child hand. The extraordinary goes quiet. That, too, is a tool, to let knowledge rest without needing to shine, and when night unfurls again, the same small orchestra is ready. The staff sings its shadow song, the cloth whispers the wind, the cord remembers a star, the beads tick the road, the bell keeps time, the camel points its wise face toward a basin it drank from when the rider was a boy. Above, if the roof is clear, the old teachers shine. If it is veiled, the floor speaks. Between them, in that gentle space the Bedouin have learned to trust. A line appears, humble, accurate, enough. The night sky did more than show the Bedouin where to go. It showed them who to be. Long before anyone spoke of philosophy, virtues were learned the way a child learns constellations, slowly, by watching, by listening, by repeating what endures. The desert's cosmic classroom extended past navigation into character, into story, into a way of standing in the world. Under that boundless ceiling, the Bedouin learned patience from distances, humility from scale, generosity from scarcity, and trust from the sky's faithful return. The stars did not argue these lessons. They exemplified them, night after night, season after season, until they sank from the eye into the heart. The ethics of the sky consider Polaris, that modest lamp that never strays. To the traveler it was north. To the elder it was also a parable. Not the brightest, the steadiest became more than a proverb for finding one's way. It was counsel for living. Keep promises, hold your post, be faithful even if your light is small. In songs recited over coffee, you hear the echo, the reliable friend, the steadfast host, the leader who doesn't dazzle but endures. The Pleiades taught a gentler wisdom. What is absent now will return. Their vanishing into sunlight warned of hard heat. Their reappearance promised relief. So the Bedouin built patience into their bones, the way you build a tent that can bend without breaking. Life, like the sky, swings through seasons. Harshness is not forever, mercy is on its way. To sleep under such a lesson is to wake kinder. The Milky Way, the path of milk, arched like a white road for those who kept their caravans together. It suggested another ethic. We go farther when we go as one. A lone rider might hurry, but a woven convoy survives. The sky's river became a metaphor for the tribe's river, grandmothers and infants, fathers and cousins, camels and dogs, stories and songs, all flowing the same direction with the same quiet insistence. Hospitality as a constellation of acts when the horizon is wide and resources thin. Generosity is not decoration. It is law. Under the stars, the Majlis, the circle of welcome, gathered like a small constellation around a flame. A stranger's shadow on the edge of camp was not a threat to be repelled, but a thirst to be answered. The coffee ritual, slow and deliberate, was navigation of another kind. 3 small cups guiding the meeting from suspicion to safety, from distance to kinship. Elders explain hospitality the way they taught the sky, by pointing at what doesn't move. If the heavens keep their pact with us, a grandfather might say, let us keep ours with whoever arrives. The rules of welcome were simple and precise. Greeting, shade, water, bread, story. Each act fixed the compass of the heart, so that even when the body wandered, the soul did not lose its direction. Story as a shelter in places where paper is a luxury and shelves are made of memory. Stories are not hobbies. They are homes. The Tagruta, the riding chant, stretched out across the dunes like a low rope that even the tired could hold. Love poems carried directions. Trickster tales carried weather signs. Lineage recitations carried the map of obligations. And promises. Around the fire, when the embers settled to their softest red, the storyteller's voice guided the tribe as surely as the lead camel's bell guided the march that a tale might begin with a star, Suhail returning low in the south, and end with a decision about where to graze. Another might lift the moral of Polaris, quiet fidelity, and slide it into the form of a friendship tested by drought. The line between cosmology and culture was thin as a hair, strong as a rope. Stars did not stay in the sky, they walked into the tents, into the language, into the way people measured themselves against the world. A living library you can walk beside. Imagine a modern evening in a desert camp where electric lights are far and the phone screens are dimmed by respect. Young people sit cross-legged. An elder leans back on a woven cushion. He points with the same slow hand his father used. He speaks the old names, Al-Thuray, Ashira with Macron, Suhail, and then says what his father did not. Your device can name them, yes, but can it steady you when the battery dies? There is no scolding in his voice, only a patient comparison. He is not competing with technology. He is inviting it to take its seat in the circle, to learn the older rhythm. In another camp, a cultural worker arrives with a small recorder and a notebook. Not to fix the living thing into a museum jar, but to help memory survive travel across generations. He asks for the lullaby that folds the calendar into sleep. A grandmother sings it soft and smiles at the awkward silence when the song stops. The recorder clicks. The song lives another way now. The sky hears its own reflection in that act. Repetition, return, patience. The relevance that refuses to retire. Why keep these ways when satellites draw lines no storm can erase? Because there are truths older than tools, and because tools sometimes fail. A guide who knows the milk roads lean will find a stranded tourist when towers are down. A header who reads the wind's handwriting will know which way to angle across. A fresh sea of ripples when storms have washed out tire tracks. A family that learned patience from the sky will last longer than a fad, and a community that learned generosity from scarcity will share longer than a grunt. Beyond survival, there is soul. People who can lift their faces and name what shines above them carry an antidote to a particular modern poverty, the poverty of wonder. The Bedouin have always had a medicine for that. It is taken at night, on a woven mat. The dose is silence, the chaser is story, the double horizon, change and care change, like wind, writes itself across everything. Borders cut roots that once were rivers. Towns tug children inward with schools and jobs. Light pollution fades the Milky Way to a rumor above cities. Phones slip directions into pockets, and palms forget how to measure a star's height in fists. Even the desert's own. Script changes. Some rains fall where they did not. Others never arrive. Elders see the shifting and do not panic. They turn to the old method. Integrate, don't idolize. If a compass helps, they use it. If a phone app names a star, they let it be a first step, not a last. If a bus brings children to camp for a weekend of skykeeping, they tell the greatest stories on the first night, because the first night is when wonder is hungriest. They sketch constellations in sand that morning winds will erase. The point is not to keep the drawing, but to keep the drawing hand. In some places, people build small dark sky preserves, a modern majlis for starlight, so that the Milky Way can be a teacher again. In others, schools invite elders to speak, not as artifacts, but as guides. A class sits outside. A teacher lights a single lantern and then puts it out. The sky takes over the lesson in a voice large enough to hush a room without walls. The modern caravan of preservation, the caravan, looks different now, but it moves for the same reason, to get memory where it needs to go. Archivists digitize tapes. Grandchildren add captions in both Arabic and English. A community page posts the old names of the stars with the new coordinates. Someone writes a children's book where Alpha is drawn as a cluster of date seeds, bright and sweet. A young guide trains in first aid and also in first wonder. He learns how to boil water and also how to boil coffee slowly so talk can be brewed with it. A small museum sets a bowl of sand under glass with 3 date pits arranged in a line. The label is short. Orion's belt as taught in the dunes. Nearby, a pair of headphones plays a writing chant that counts the night in images. Visitors slip them on and look up at a dome where a projector lifts the old sky for city-raised eyes. Children reach for it with hands that cannot touch and leave with minds that can. The rope that must be braided again and again. Every generation receives the rope and must braid it again. It's not enough to inherit. You must practice. So a family promises to go out once a month and sleep where the stars can be trustworthy again. They bring a blanket, a kettle, a phone turned to its dimmest face, and, most important, time. A boy measures a star with his fist for the first time. A girl learns the name of the lamp that never wanders. Someone quotes the old proverb without looking it up. The earth forgets, the sky repeats. The children grin, not because they understand everything, but because the words feel like a password that opens a door. Back home, the city light tries to erase what was learned, but it cannot. The mind has its own dark sky preserved now. In a tense hour, an adult remembers, not the brightest, the steadiest. In a season of absence, someone recalls, Alpha returns. Waiting becomes kinder. Welcome becomes easier. The sky has done what it always does when invited inside. It teaches a way of being that stands up in weather. The enduring lesson, if you listen closely, you can hear the oldest sentence the Bedouin learned, the one spoken by the desert and echoed by the sky, consent to be taught by what is larger than you. From that consent flowed navigation, yes, but also manners, patience, poetry, and a culture that could walk across emptiness without becoming empty. In a world that changes faster than a dune under hard wind, that sentence is still a compass worth carrying. Tonight, somewhere on a plain of ripples the moon has silvered, someone old is pointing up, someone young is not speaking, and between them passes the rope, soft, strong, quiet. It does not glitter. It holds. The night is never only the past. Even now, if you move far enough from the cities and their glittering forgetfulness, you can sit in a circle of woven rugs and hear voices that belong to this hour, not a museum silence, but a camp's hush, where the sky is still a roof, the fire is still a teacher, and memory walks into the present on 2 good feet. The elders are not relics. They are living compasses, the kind you cannot buy and should never sell, quietly aligning young hearts to the north of what matters. In one camp, an old navigator we'll call Hamid leans against a saddlebag, his hands folded, his gaze lifted in a habit older than his bones. He does not give a lecture. He does something gentler. He lets the night grow large enough to hold the lesson, then begins, as his father did, by pointing without hurry. Polaris first, never the brightest, always the most faithful. He waits for eyes to find it, then shows the Big Dipper's pointer. Stars as if they were two fingers drawn slowly across the dark. He asks nothing in return, not answers, not applause, only stillness. A boy whispers, "I have a star app." Hamid nods. "Good. Let it tell you the names. Then put it down and see if they will tell you theirs." The boy smiles, embarrassed, and delighted at once. Somewhere a kettle murmurs agreement across the dunes, candles glow in another tent. Russia, silver hair tucked beneath a dark scarf, holds a small box of seeds and dried leaves. She is an herbalist, keeper of tinctures and teas, the one mothers seek when a child's cough lingers or a traveller's stomach protests the change in water. Her knowledge, too, is a navigation, though its map is perfumed and green. We harvest. After the little flock returns, she says, meaning Althurae, the Pleiades. Not before. The plant listens to the sky like we do. She smiles as if sharing a secret with the constellations themselves. A granddaughter records the names. Softly into her phone, first in Arabic, then in English, so the knowledge can cross borders her grandmother never will. They will store the audio in 3 places, not because they do not trust the cloud, but because the desert taught them to have a second water skin. A few days later, a white pickup crawls over the ripples. Out step 2 people who are neither elders nor children, Lena and Fard, cultural workers with a small organization that keeps memory supple. They do not arrive as authorities. They arrive as listeners with batteries and notebooks. They set up a windscreen over a microphone so the shamel won't turn stories to static. Fard asks about writing chants. Lena asks about lullabies. Both ask for the old star names, the ones that sound like water poured from a brass ewer. When the recorder's red light comes on, no one stiffens. The elders have seen cameras before. What they relish is respect, and respect changes a lens into a window. Hamid draws the sky in sand while a child films his hand rather than his face, because hands are where skill lives. He sets 3 date pits for Orion's belt, presses a pebble, 4 Polaris, and sprinkles a thin curve for the Milky Way. The wind will erase the drawing before sunrise. Lena is glad. Let it. The drawing belongs to tonight, she says. The video belongs to whoever needs it when the city has swallowed. They're stars. On another night, a small group of students arrives from a coastal town. Teachers have promised them a dark sky lesson, which sounds like a new subject until they see it is the oldest one. Saeed, a ranger who helps manage a fledgling dark sky, preserve, greets them with a grin and a low flame. He speaks first about safety and water. Then, when pockets have given up their glow, he asks them to lie back and imagine a ceiling that is not a ceiling. He talks less than he points. He corrects only softly. A girl recognizes Althurae from a grandmother's song and mouths the remembered line. The words arrive like rain on ground that has not forgotten how to drink. These evenings look like nostalgia, but they are not. They are maintenance. In a world where GPS draws lines the wind cannot smear and satellite weather tells a herder which hour to move the flock, the old knowledge still matters because it teaches something the screen cannot. What to do when the line fails, and how to be a person while you wait for it to return. The elders know this, and so their lessons are broader than bearings. Not the brightest, the steadiest, Hamid repeats, and the sentence fits equally well on stars and on people. Drink before you are thirsty, says Russia, meaning both water and attention. Share shade before you need it, she adds, pouring coffee into small cups that fit the hand like promises. There are interviews being recorded now in many places, some neat with lapel mics and scripted questions, some messy with the grand signs. Phone held under a chin. A few of these voices end up online. A few end up in archives where humidity is measured as carefully as kindness. The most useful ones end up in classrooms without walls, replayed beside fires for children who need to hear how a story sounds when it takes its time. In each recording, the night hums in the background, a bell on a camel's chest, the hush. Of sand, a kettle's soft insistence. You can hear the environment shaping the voice, the way a river shapes a bank. The elders speak not only of where to go, but of how to stay human while going. They talk about hospitality as a navigation of hearts, how a stranger's shadow at the edge of camp is a direction you must always choose, toward welcome, toward water, toward bread. They talk about patience as a survival tactic measured not in hours but in generations. They talk about honor as a steadying star when weather turns unkind. They are not naive about the present. They have seen borders stitched across roots that were once a family's arteries. They have watched bright towns draw grandchildren inward. They have watched the Milky Way become a rumor above light-poured streets. They know that climate is changing its handwriting, that rains arrive with new accents, that dunes move more quickly in certain places and are pinned in others by fences and roads. But look at how they respond, not with despair, but with the same method that carried them across empty maps, integration. They do not reject devices, they rank them. We use the compass, Saeed shrugs, and we use the star. When they agree, we smile. When they disagree, we wait, or we ask the wind. Lena uses a star app as training wheels. She encourages a student to name a constellation with a phone once and then with a finger forever. Fard prints a star wheel on cardboard because not every classroom can charge a screen. He laminates it at a shop that also sells kites. The wheel fits in a backpack and needs only a thumb and the night to work. Old and new sit side by side like two friends sharing a cushion. Challenges arrive in dust storms and in suitcases. Light pollution is a thief that does not break locks. It simply makes the sky faint. The elders answer by going farther out, by arguing for a few places where darkness can be protected the way water is. Saeed helps a council write a small rule. No floodlights on certain nights, no unshielded lamps near the preserve. It is not a grand law, but it is a beginning. And beginnings deserve their coffee. Urban drift is another challenge. The old routes are facts remembered by bodies that no longer walk them every season. To answer, communities build apprenticeships that do not require a full nomadic life but do require repeated nights under the open teaching of the sky. A dozen teenagers spend 2 long weekends with Hamid, who says little and expects much. They come home sunburned and unreasonably patient. One will become a guide. One will become a nurse who teaches night shift colleagues how to keep the circadian rhythm kind. One will become a poet whose metaphors step correctly because his feet have learned to. Tourism is an opportunity that can turn into a trap, performing memory until it empties out. The elders are wary. Lena's organization sets boundaries. No costumes that mock, no scripts that simplify. No staged authenticity where a story is made to run in circles until it forgets its way. Instead, they design star walks that begin with silence, move through names at a human pace, and end with a small chore, helping fold a rug, carrying water, because shared work is hospitality's secret chord. Visitors leave with fewer photos and more breath in their lungs. It is the kind of disappointment that changes a life. There are quieter efforts, too, almost invisible unless you know where to look. A school librarian labels a shelf the sky shelf and places there whatever the budget allows. A children's picture book where Althuré is drawn as date seeds. A spiral-bound booklet of proverbs gathered from 3 camps. A map of the new dark sky preserve taped above a poster of the Milky Way as it would look without the city's electric snow. A science teacher prints out Hamid's sand sky drawing as a handout and writes at the top, "Copy in sand once, copy in memory forever." A grandmother starts a WhatsApp group that is not for forwarding news but for forwarding voice notes, 2-minute songs, 1 proverb a week, a blessing for travelers, the pronunciation of a star's name that loses its taste when only typed. The group becomes a long, low thread that pulls scattered cousins into one listening ear. Modern Bedouin artists, too, sew the sky into cloth. Rosha teaches an embroidery circle where the motifs are not flowers alone but constellations. Orion in indigo thread, a milk road of seed pearls, Polaris a small silver coin. The girls count stitches the way their brothers count fists above the horizon. Fashion shows are not the point. The point is that a blouse can become a star map, and a star map can become a story you button at your throat before walking out into a bright street that has forgotten how to look up. From time to time, officials ask for spectacles. The elders offer instead calm accuracy. At a heritage festival, Hamid stands beside a simple placard that reads, "Not the brightest, the steadiest." He answers 100 versions of the same question with the pleasure of someone shelling dates. Slowly, cleanly, without waste. Children leave his corner of the festival less impressed than steadied, which is the better gift. A young guide, the boy with the star app, now taller, works nights at a camp that promises the real sky. He has learned not to make the stars perform. He begins with breath, with the kettle's small song, with 3 questions asked into the dark. Where is your north tonight? What is absent that will return? Who will you be when the battery dies? People laugh softly. Then they look up. A minute later, something old happens to their faces. The living legacy is not a museum piece. It is a braid that must be rebraided, a rope that must be passed hand to hand and thickened with new fibers, cardboard star wheels and field recorders and ranger badges and phone quieting baskets at the edge of the majlis, so that it will not snap when weather tests it. The elders know the weather will test it. That is what weather is for. A final scene. Dawn is low and pink. The fire is ash. The tents are half folded. Hamid and Russia sit side by side, not speaking. A notebook lies open with 2 lines inside. 1. In a granddaughter's careful script, 1 in a grandson's quick one. The earth forgets, the sky repeats. Beneath it, a second line added last night in a different hand. We repeat what the sky repeats. Someone underlines both with a sprig of dry thyme and closes the notebook on its scent. They rise. They tie. They step into a day that is older than maps and friendlier than fear. Above them, the last visible points of Ulthure wait for the sun's erasure without alarm. This too is instruction. To endure vanishing without believing you have ended, to trust your season will return. To hand your name into a younger mouth and hear it pronounced correctly. That is the living legacy. Stars that still teach, elders who still point, children who still listen, and a world that, for all its noise, still grows quiet when the right voice says, "Look up." In every age, there is a wind that tries to blow the roof away. For the Bedouin, that roof was never woven from canvas alone. It was the night itself, the boundless ceiling of stars that steadied feet and tempered hearts. Today, the winds that worry that roof are different from the old ones. They arrive as speed, as glare, as hunger for the quick and the loud. They come as city lights smeared across horizons, as borders stitched across routes once walked like prayers, as weather that has changed its handwriting. They come as screens that tell the sky's story for us until we forget how to let the sky tell it to us. And yet, the work of continuity is not a war. It is a craft. The Bedouin have always known this. When a gale tears one side of the tent loose, you do not curse the wind. You tie a better knot. When dunes erase a track, you do not lament the erasure. You learn again how to read what cannot be erased. The old method remains. Integrate, don't idolize. Braid, don't cling. Move forward with what is steady, and teach the steady to the young until they carry it as quietly as breath. The unmaking, 3 kinds of forgetting light that steals darkness. The Milky Way, once a nightly shawl, has become a rumor over many towns. Unshielded lamps throw hard circles on the ground and drown the soft ceiling that taught patience and direction. Elders speak of this gently, as if consoling a child. The sky is still there. We have only made it shy. In their words is a diagnosis and a kindness. Light is not evil. It is unlistening. It can be taught manners, speed that steals attention. Machines make distance small and the day thin. A road that once took 2 nights now takes 2 hours. An hour that once held story now holds notification. The body adapts to haste until slowness feels like a lack. But a compass that only works at human tempo cannot be convinced to hurry. The sky keeps the same pace it has always kept. It will teach you, but not if you arrive out of breath and ask it to be brief, walls that steal roots. Where caravans once flowed, Lines have been drawn, fences, permits, gates, laws. Families who knew a dozen wells by taste now know office hours by heart. The map has acquired obstacles the stars cannot move. Memory adapts again. What once was a single, long migration becomes a series of allowed arcs. The rope is still braided. It just takes more hands, whether that steals familiarity. Winds arrive strange, rains late or not at all. Dunes harden where they once shifted, plants withdraw. The old Anwa, the careful observations that tied star risings to rain and season, still help, but must be listened to with fresh ears. Tradition survives not by refusing revision, but by refusing to forget how revision is done, by watching, by writing it into the next chant without breaking the last one to the quiet repairs, for kinds of keeping darkness. Dark sky preserves are a new kind of majlis, gathering places where the main guest is starlight. Rangers mark out zones where floodlights are hooded and late-night glare is asked to be courteous. A town agrees to sleep its neon on certain nights. A campsite changes white bulbs for warm ones and points them at the ground, not the sky. These are not grand gestures. They are polite ones, the kind that hospitality understands. The result is small but miraculous. The Milky Way returns like a forgiven friend. Children gasp. Elders do not gasp. They nod, as if hearing a familiar voice through a door that was always there. Keeping voice. Voices are preserved in the way water is, stored in more than one skin. Recordings are made, grandmothers singing Althuré into the phone. A shakes hands drawing Orion in sand while a small camera watches, writing chants captured with the wind screened away. One copy is given to a family, one to a community group, one to a server far away where fire cannot touch it. Transcripts are made with respect. Names are spelled with care so they will not lose their taste. Each voice note is a small well someone else can drink from when the day is hot. Keeping practice. A curriculum without walls is written in the shape of a weekend. Arrive at dusk, put the phones to sleep in a woven basket, pour coffee slowly, and begin with silence. Point, don't perform. Teach the fist measure. Ask for the belt, the dipper, the lamp that does not wander. Walk a sand map with 3 date pits. At dawn, plant a stick and draw the east-west line. Nap at noon. Sing at night. Repeat. Call it a workshop if the grant needs a word. To the heart, it will always be an apprenticeship, keeping manners. Tourism is invited, but asked to behave. Group sizes are kept human. Bright lights are forbidden. No staged authenticity. Elders are paid fairly. Animals are not made into props. Stories are told once per night, not until they grow thin. Visitors carry water and fold rugs. They leave. With fewer photos and more stories they feel unqualified to tell, which is precisely right. Respect is a star you navigate by in any century. The companionship of technology, and its limits, the elders have learned to seat phones and compasses in the circle without making them chiefs. A phone can tell a child Orion's name when embarrassment keeps him from asking. A cardboard star can replace the phone the next night so the child learns how to find the same name with his eyes. A compass can confirm what the dipper pointed to, or disagree. If it disagrees, there is a ritual the old always used. Wait. Let one more sign speak. Ask the wind, ask the ground, ask the camel. When 3 voices align, move. Apps are built by careful hands. Star apps taught in Arabic with local names. Offline maps that work where the signal ends. Audio overlays of elders pronouncing the old constellations so the mouth learns what the eye sees. A simple night school kit is printed. A folded star wheel with the Bedouin names, a 1-page. Guide to measuring with a fist, a drawing of the shadow circle, a proverb tucked into the corner. The earth forgets, the sky repeats. Nothing fancy, nothing that needs charging. Let the kit be a bridge, not a destination. A small archive appears online, a living one, not a tomb, where recordings and drawings can be found and corrected. If a name is wrong or a story misremembered, a comment becomes a gentle patch. My aunt says her mother called it this. Memory admits amendment the way a good tent admits night air, but technology is also invited to learn humility. Lights are shielded, Screens are dimmed. Drones are asked to stay grounded where camels rest. Microphones are placed with wind in mind. Tech that makes itself small will survive. Tech that demands center stage will be asked to sit among the luggage. The stars are the head guests. Everything else earns its place by how quietly it helps people look up, revising the sky without breaking it. The sky is faithful, but the ground is changing. The old correlations between star risings and rains belong to a climate that is recalculating its promises. The answer is not to throw away the anwa. It is to take attendance again. Each season, communities note, when did Ulthurae last? Glitter at dusk. And what did the next month bring? When did Suhail appear low and patient? And what wind followed? Patterns are redrawn with the same care the first ones were drawn. Proverbs open a new room. When the little flock returns, watch the wells, but trust the wind's new handwriting. A chant acquires an extra line, not to contradict the past, but to honor the present. Bright dog at the morning's rim, walk early. Till the light grows dim, if cloud withholds the promised rain, share shade, move light, and drink again. Elders resist the fantasy of certainty. They teach, instead, the dignity of adjustment. A good navigator does not fall in love with a single sign. He keeps a council of signs and lets them argue until truth floats to the top like cream. Borders, permits, and the choreography of the possible routes now require papers and plans. The answer is not stubbornness. It is choreography. Cultural groups plot legal corridors, short arcs joined by permission, so that apprentices still walk the spine of a journey even if they must step aside and resume it later. Maps are printed with kindness for the authorities, showing that the caravan is a class, not a protest. Rangers and elders exchange numbers. The sky is consulted for timing, the office for routes. It is less romantic and more responsible. But at the fire's edge, the chant sounds the same. Where corridors cannot be found, proxy routes are made. A salt flat that teaches mirage without danger. A set of dunes inside a preserve where slip faces can be read. A ridge where the wind is faithful enough to write its sentence twice. Students learn the grammar of the desert even if they cannot recite the whole poem in a single night. Economy without extraction wisdom must earn a living without being sold. Elders are compensated like teachers, not tipped like entertainers. Young guides learn to price gentleness. Small groups, long nights, short words. A share of each tour keeps the preserve dark. A share keeps a well clean. A share buys recording time for someone's grandmother. Visitors know where their money walked. They return home with a receipt that reads like a prayer list. You bought time. You bought quiet. You bought memory another month. Small crafts carry sky into cities in ways that keep dignity intact. Embroidery that traces constellations. Ceramics marked with a dipper's pointer. Date boxes printed with a map that names the old stars beside the new ones. Souvenir becomes syllabus. Merchandising becomes mentorship. The point is not revenue alone. The point is that money flows. Like water, useful, necessary, never the host. Teaching the teacher schools, too, revise their rooms. A science class borrows 1 night a month from the sky and calls it fieldwork in patience. A literature teacher assigns a poem where Polaris is not a metaphor but a neighbor. A history class invites an elder and does not interrupt him with bells. A principal buys 6 red-lensed headlamps and a sack of mats. The first night is clumsy. The third is better. By the 6th, silence enters the room like a respected elder, and no one fidgets when it speaks. Teacher training includes the simple things: how to find the North Star, how to build a shadow circle, how to make a star wheel. With scissors and a brad, how to pour coffee slowly enough that a story has time to arrive. A rubric is written with unusual criteria: measured quiet, accurate pointing, shared work. Grades are softer, learning is firmer. The medicine of belonging modernity can shrink the sky to a wallpaper. It can also shrink the self. People forget the size of the world and mistake their own anxious weather for the climate of everything. The old ways carry a cure that does not require slogans. Lie down. Put the screen away. Look up until your breathing forgets its hurry. Find the lamp that does not wander. Count the fists to the little flock. Name the river of light with the name your elders used. You will feel small and accompanied at once, a combination that medicine bottles do not sell. For diaspora families, skykeeping is a way home that no border can stamp. In a far city, a grandmother points to a dim lamp between buildings and says, "The name she said in the desert." The child repeats it and feels the rope in the word. A recording from a preserve plays in a bedroom. Wind, camel bell, kettle, voice. The child falls asleep under a remembered ceiling no landlord can replace. Tomorrow the same child will walk under a pale cloud of city light and still feel oriented. That is the point. The map within is portable. What endures, and how, the future will not be the past. It never has been. The rope must be rebraided with new fibers, dark sky bylaws and laminated star wheels, ranger radios and phone baskets at the edge of the majlis, apprenticeships that fit a school calendar, recordings labelled carefully so that a name is not misspelled into exile. But the rope is still a rope. It still passes hand to hand. It still holds. When preservation is discouraged by exhaustion, there is a way to rest without stopping. Make the scale small. One night a month. One story carefully told. One child shown how a fist measures a star. One lantern left unlit. If enough smalls are woven, a large appears. This is Bedouin arithmetic. A caravan is nothing but footsteps until it arrives at in the end. The work is familiar. It asks what the desert always asked: attention over noise, patience over haste, steady over showy, together over alone. The old proverbs still fit the new tasks. Not the brightest, the steadiest. Shield the lights, build the habit. The earth forgets, the sky repeats. Observe again, write it down. Clouds veil the roof, but the floor speaks. When tech fails, ask wind and sand. Drink at memories well before you thirst. Practice before the emergency. Follow the follower. Let one sign lead you to the next. Let one keeper train the next. Tonight, somewhere between a fence and a permit, an elder plants a staff and draws a circle. Children watch the shadows arc as if seeing an old friend teaching a new trick. A ranger clicks off a floodlight and looks up. The sky steps nearer in gratitude. A cultural worker tests batteries, not out of fear, but out of care. A camel leans its head toward a well it knew before the boy beside it was born. A mother sings the little flock into her child's sleep and records it, then sets the phone. Face down. Across all these scenes, a single, unhurried sentence can be heard if you listen for it. We will keep what kept us. The wind rises. The roof lifts and settles and holds. There is a way of looking at the world that does not wrestle with it for answers. It waits, and in the waiting it learns. The Bedouin cultivated this way because the desert demanded it and the night sky rewarded it. What they practiced beneath. The stars was not only a technique for crossing distances, but a discipline for being human, to observe before judging, to move with patience, to ask the land and the heavens to speak and to be quiet long enough to hear their reply. In an age that celebrates speed and confuses brightness with truth, their perspective offers a necessary antidote. It is not nostalgia. It is medicine. The first lesson is observation, but observation of a particular kind. Not a frantic scanning for the next novelty, but a sustained gaze that allows pattern to appear. A Bedouin child learned constellations the way a musician learns a melody, by hearing it over and over until the intervals settle inside the body. A man measured the stars. Height in fists not because he was playing at astronomy, but because this simple, repeatable act anchored his sense of time and place. Attentive looking became more than information gathering. It became a familiarity with a world so deep it started to look like love. We can practice this without a camel or a tent. It begins with a single decision. Tonight, after the last light is turned down, go outside and give the sky 5 unbroken minutes. Do not make the stars perform. Do not turn the moment into a scavenger hunt. Simply look. Notice how your breathing changes. Notice how you begin to recognize one bright point near another, and then a line between them, and then a small shape that was there all along. The first minute is impatience shedding its skin. The second is muscles remembering how to be still. By the fourth, the sky has grown bigger without moving. By the fifth, you feel smaller and more accompanied. This is not romanticism. It is a recalibration of scale that humans across millennia relied upon to stay sane. The second lesson is patience. The desert did not hurry and would not be hurried. In that classroom, the teachers, wind, sand, stars, spoke in long sentences. The Bedouin learned to let a sign complete itself before drawing conclusions. If the roof of the night was veiled with cloud, they asked the floor for counsel, dune faces, wind ripple, the lean of shrubs. If one sign contradicted another, they did not rage. They waited for a third to arbitrate. You can hear the ethic in their proverbs. Not the brightest, the steadiest. The earth forgets, the sky repeats. Patience is not passivity. It is precise timing. Moving when dawn's cool allows miles without cruelty. Resting when noon would waste strength. Choosing a route not because a map commands it, but because wind and sand and memory agree. In our lives, patience looks less like falling behind and more like placing the next step where it will hold. It is reading a child's face for what it is trying to say rather than what you wish it would say. It is pausing before a reply. It is letting a task be finished properly, instead of simply quickly. A soul that has practiced patience under the stars finds it easier to practice patience under fluorescent lights. The third lesson is respect, not as posture, but as practice. In a land where water is precious, hospitality is not a flourish. It is law. Sharing shade, bread, and story with a stranger is not sentimental. It is an infrastructure choice that keeps communities alive. The cosmos did not feel distant to the Bedouin. It felt like a good neighbor whose reliability deserved reciprocity. If the heavens kept their pact, returning night after night with the same lamps in same places, then people were obliged to keep theirs, to be steady and welcome, to be careful with resources, to make generosity a habit rather than a headline respect. In our moment, looks like stewardship. Shielding outdoor lights so the sky can speak. Choosing a warm bulb pointed downward instead of a blue glare pointed everywhere. Closing a gate so animals are not cornered by our carelessness. Listening to an elder's story without checking a screen. Buying a little less novelty and acquiring a little more attention. These are small knots in the tent rope. The roof holds. Because of small knots. A fourth lesson is humility. Polaris is not the brightest star, yet it is the steady one. That sentence draws a line through the sky and through character. The Bedouin learned to trust companions who kept their course over, those who dazzled and drifted. Humility does not erase excellence, it aims it. A steady friend is a north you can build a life around. In a culture that applauds the loudest signal, humility remembers that the quietest signals often carry the most guidance. A heartbeat is quieter than a shout. So is a compass needle. So is the voice that says, wait, listen for one more sign. This humility widens to a fifth lesson, interdependence. A caravan is a moving constellation. Each traveler is a star. The lines between them, trust, chores, shared water, shared stories, make the pattern that allows the whole to move. The Milky Way itself became a metaphor for that togetherness. A river of lights flowing the same direction across a dark country. Our own migrations, through projects, through griefs, through careers, are not meant to be done alone. To accept help is not to admit failure. It is to join the pattern that kept human beings from scattering into the desert of their own pride. Look up with these 5 in mind: observation, patience, respect, humility, interdependence, and the sky becomes a teacher again. Even under a city haze, a handful of bright markers can be found. Orion's belt, 3 neat stitches. The dipper's bowl and handle. The northern lamp, sometimes faint but faithful. The Pleiades, when they're high and the season is kind. If light has made them shy, drive an hour, once a month, and let the old ceiling come home to you. Bring a thermos and one repeated intention. To watch without supposing yourself the center of everything, practical steps help. Make a sky notebook, not a gorgeous one, just a notebook that is not afraid of night air. Each outing, write the date. Draw the horizon, sketch the simple marker you recognize and where it sits. It will be messy. It should be. A child's hand makes the best drawings because it has not learned to pretend. After a year, you will have your own calendar in a scroll that belongs to your life. Add a rule to your lights. Use warm bulbs, shielded. Downward. You'll sleep better and your neighbors, winged and human, will, too. Once in a while, leave the phone face down and try naming a star with your mouth instead of with your app. Use the app afterward if you like. Let it be training wheels, not the bicycle if you have a friend who grew up under a fuller sky, a grandparent, a neighbor, someone from a village with less electric snow. Invite them to teach you one name in the language that raised them. Names are keys. They open doors in memory and belonging. A star called Ashio with Macron tastes different on the tongue than one called Sirius. Alpha carries a calendar inside it that Pleiades, for all its beauty, does not. The goal is not to replace names, but to admit that the sky is multilingual and that we are guests in a very old house. None of this requires you to abandon modern tools. The Bedouin did not worship methods. They combined them. They set a compass. Beside the dipper. They let a camel's instinct sit at the council table with wind and dune and memory. We can do the same. Place a star app beside a cardboard star wheel, a satellite forecast beside the grandmother who can tell by the morning smell whether rain will come in the next 2 days, a dark sky ordinance beside a habit of turning. Porch lights off after 10. The point is not to choose between old and new, but to braid them until the rope is strong. If this sounds like a philosophy, that is because it is. But it is also a way of resting. The sky invites us into a posture that does not exhaust itself pretending to be in control. It reminds us that we are small and that smallness is not the same as insignificance. It reframes urgency. It slows the heart to a tempo that decisions can survive. And it strengthens something we are in danger of losing, a felt connection to. A world that is not made by us and therefore can teach us. When you next stand under night, try a quiet ritual. Touch the ground with your palm. Lift the same hand to measure a bright point over the horizon. Whisper a name for it, one you know, or one you're learning. Breathe until the constellation finds its familiar shape. Then ask yourself the question. That ties you to every ancestor who ever looked up for guidance. What has the sky taught me that a screen never could? Answers may not come as sentences. They might come as a loosening in the shoulders, a steadier breath, a reminder to be faithful. In a small promise. These are not small answers. They are the ones that travel, and if you are making something for others, a video, a lesson, a night walk, end the way the desert ends its sentences, not with a command, but with an invitation. Ask your listeners to take their own 5 minutes. Under the stars, to sketch one shape, to rename one anxiety as something smaller in the face of a very large roof. Then open the circle wider with a question that lets memory into the room. What forgotten wisdom from the past do you think still holds power today? Share it. Tell a story. Leave a note for someone who will read it when their own night feels too crowded to see through. That, too, is navigation. We inherit the same sky that steadied our ancestors. It has not grown weary of teaching. We have only grown hurried in our asking. To look up again, with new eyes, with a calmer breath, is to remember a way of learning that happens at the speed of stars. The Bedouin practiced it because the desert asked for it. We can practice it because the world, even in cities of glass, still needs it. This is not nostalgia. It is a small apprenticeship you can begin any clear evening, on a balcony, in a yard, by a window, or on a patch of grass at the edge of town. What follows is an invitation to look up gently, to let wonder be practical again, and to let practical things be wondrous. Make a little darkness, without going far. Light is not the enemy. Glare is. Choose a place where lights are few or can be made courteous. A backyard with warm, downward shielded bulbs. A rooftop where you can click off a harsh flood for an hour. A park's darker corner. If you can, cup your hands around your eyes to block stray glare. If you cannot, wear the brim of a cap like a visor against the city's bright snow. Even small darkness helps the eye remember its night sight. 5 minutes of patience and the sky blooms. If you have control over a few bulbs at home, try this experiment. Switch one bright blue-white bulb for a soft, warm one pointed down. Notice how your shoulders drop. Notice how the sky grows louder when you make the ground speak more softly. The Bedouin would call this manners, teaching your lights to be good guests at the night's table. A breathing ritual to begin under the open. Ceiling, stand or sit. Let your exhale be longer than your inhale. Count 4 in, 6 out, 5 times. This is not superstition. It is instruction to your nervous system that the hunt is over for the day. When the body believes you are safe, your eyes learn better. Let the night arrive for 30 slow heartbeats before you ask it any questions. The first 5 minutes, find one friend. Do not hunt the whole sky. Find one reliable friend. 3 easy candidates. Polaris, the North Star. Locate the Big Dipper. The 2 stars at the far edge of the bowl point straight to it. Polaris is modest, but faithful. You will not forget the feeling of finding steadiness in a quiet place. Orion's Belt, winter evenings. 3 neat stitches in a straight line. From a bright city, you may see only those 3. That is enough. The Pleiades, Althurae, a soft, tiny mist of diamonds. In poor skies it looks like a glow. With patience it resolves into a little handful. Name it softly, with your mouth, not your phone. If you know more than one name, Arabic and Latin, a family nickname, say both. A name is a handle your mind can keep even when the sky is shy. Repeat the name while you breathe. Let the star become a person you can greet. Measure the sky with your own hand. Hold your arm straight in front of you. A closed fist is roughly 10 degrees of sky. Your pinky finger is about 1 degree. Count how many fists your friend star sits above the horizon. Write the number down. Check again an hour later. Without any app, you have made a clock, the way a desert child did on a woven mat beside a sleeping camel. This act is small and ridiculous only to people who have forgotten that the body is a good instrument. Start a sky notebook. Unpretty is perfect. Use any small notebook you don't mind wrinkling. Date the page. Sketch your horizon. Rooftops, A. Tree, the antenna. Mark your one friend. Note, time, weather, moon phase, how many fists high. Add 1 sentence about how you feel. Tired, soothed, restless, curious. After a month, read back. You will discover a pattern of the sky, yes, but also of your life. The Bedouin carried memory in voices. You will carry it in a rough spiral, bound with cheap paper. Both are valid maps, city nights and country nights. And why both matter? In a city, you may see only a dozen bright points. They are enough. Bright points make a scaffold. Orion's Belt, the Dipper's big spoon. Bright Sirius barking in winter. Golden Arcturus rising in spring. Vega and Altair slanting summer. Find one shape each month. Add nothing else. Repetition deepens faster than novelty. That if you can drive an hour, do it once a month. Pack a thermos and a blanket. Pull off where it is safe and legal. Let your eyes drink the dark for 20 minutes. Notice the Milky Way if the season and latitude allow. To a Bedouin, that pale river was a road. To you, it can be a scale correction, a reminder that you are happily not the center of this map. The moon is a calendar. You can hold the moon halves. The month cleanly. Waxing, brighter each night. Waning, thinner each dawn. Learn to love its phases. A thin crescent at sunset is a beginning. A high, full moon at midnight is a lantern that hides smaller stars but reveals dunes, roofs, trails. Stand where you are and point, horns of the crescent cup toward the sun that has just set. The roundness opens toward the night. Mark the age of the moon, in days since new, on your page. You will start to predict its face before you see it. This is how farmers, sailors, and desert walkers kept company with time. A monthly ritual, small, steady, kind. Choose one night, the first clear evening after the new moon. Set an alarm that says only look up. 10 minutes outside, no photos, No tasks. Find your friend's star. Measure. Note. Go back in. That is all. Do it again next month. 12 notes make a ring you can hold. Tradition is just repetition with love. A family curriculum with no tests if you have children nearby, your own, and neighbors, students. Make the night simple, playful, and precise. 3-point game. Point north, Polaris. Point east, where? Orion rises in winter. Point to the moon. Laugh at wrong guesses. Try again. Fist ladder. Count fists to your friend at dinner, at story time, before bed. See the numbers climb. Sand sky or chalk sky. Draw a circle on dirt or pavement. 3 pebbles for Orion's belt, a tiny sprinkle for the Milky Way, a small button. 4 Polaris. Walk the map. Morning can erase it. Good. Memory should live in people. Lullaby calendar. Sing Alfuray into sleep. Little flock, little light. Hide and bring back cool night. They won't remember the verse. They will. Remember that the sky and care share a language. What tools to welcome and how not to let them lead. A star app is training wheels, not the bicycle. Use it to check a guess, to learn a name spelling, to notice a planet's slow stroll among stars. Then face down the phone. Ask your eyes to know what your screen knows. If you want a tool that doesn't need charging, print a cardboard star wheel, planisphere, with local names if you can find them. Slip a red film over any flashlight to keep your night vision calm. These are humble, durable helpers, the kind that would be welcome at any desert fire. Etiquette for the sky and each other. Make quiet the language of your circle. Speak softly. Point carefully. Share the field of view. If someone cannot find a shape, do not flood the sky with explanation. Guide their finger along the line. Let them discover. When they do, say nothing for 3 breaths. Silence is applause the stars can hear. Turn off outdoor lights that are not needed. Shield the ones you keep. If a neighbor asks why, say, I want to see what my grandparents saw, and I sleep better. It's true. The circadian rhythm is a caravan that prefers darkness to travel by. A way to carry the sky indoors on nights of cloud or weather. Practice listening to what remains, Bedouin style. Learn a few proverbs that traveled with caravans because they work, not the brightest, the steadiest. Aim for fidelity in people and in practice. The earth forgets, the sky repeats. Check again, keep a notebook. Clouds veil the roof, but the floor speaks. If one sign is hidden, another is present. Write them on a kitchen card. Let them guide ordinary choices, a conversation, a schedule, a promise. Wonder that is useful, and usefulness that is wonder. Some nights, the sky will not answer questions, it will ask them. Allow both kinds. What made the desert trust lights? So small. Why does steadiness beat brightness? What changes in me when I spend 5 minutes beneath a roof no one built? These are not idle. They are practical. People who practice wonder calmly tend to choose better routes in daylight. They rush less. They notice more. They keep company with patience, and patience keeps company with safety, kindness, and accuracy. A small pilgrimage you can afford once a season. Plan a dark sky evening. Pack water, a snack, a blanket, a warm layer. Tell someone where you will be. Drive where the horizon is wider. Arrive before twilight. Watch the evening form itself. First star, second star, a faint band of the Milky Way if your latitude allows. Pour something warm, slowly. Name one shape out loud. Measure one height. Draw one line. Then rest your head and let the sky do its work, scaling you down to human size in the kindest way. When you return home, leave one light off. The room will feel larger, softer. The Bedouin would recognize the feeling. The world has not shrunk, your attention has grown. The invitation that keeps the circle open looking up with new eyes is not a performance, it is a habit. Begin small. Repeat gently. Share it the way water is shared, without boasting, without hoarding. If you make videos or host nights, remember the old rule of the Majlis: everyone leaves steadier than they arrived. Give people one new friend in the sky and one old question to carry into sleep, and when your time under the roof is done for the night, close with the call that opens conversations across centuries, an asking that is not rhetorical, not accusatory, but generous. What forgotten wisdom from the past do you think still holds power today? Write it in your notebook. Post it for others. Whisper it to a child who can't sleep. The answers are a caravan. Let them travel. There is a moment, somewhere between your last sip of something warm and the first chill on your knuckles, when the night feels close enough to touch. The roofs of the day have folded. The ceiling above is not a ceiling at all, but a long, patient meadow of light. In that moment, you can feel two times at once: the present, where tires hiss on wet streets and notifications breathe at your elbow, and a much older present, where a kettle mutters by a low fire, a camel sighs into the sand, and an elder gestures upward with the unhurried hand of someone who has never needed a screen to be sure of the north. These two times are not enemies. They are neighbors. If we listen well, they will teach each other. This is where we have traveled together, from the Bedouin's cosmic classroom to the small rituals that make modern nights gentle again. We have held stars like tools and like poems. We have read wind in cloth, compass in dunes, seasons in a flock of tiny lights. We have let elders speak into microphones without losing the warmth of their voices. And now, as all good journeys do, this one asks to become larger than the steps we have taken. The desert would say, braid one more strand into the rope, then pass it on. A small litany for modern travelers before we ask the world anything. We can promise it a few things. Not vows. Vows are heavy, but small liturgies that travel lightly. Observation. I will give the night 5 unbroken minutes. Patience. I will let one sign finish speaking before I claim to understand it. Respect. I will teach my light's manners and my words economy. Humility. I will trust the steady more than the dazzling. Interdependence. I will remember that caravans and constellations are made of relationships. Say them silently as you lace your shoes, as you turn a bulb downward, as you tuck your phone face down beneath a small cloth. You will feel slightly foolish the first time. Keep going. The stars never mocked anyone for repeating themselves. 0.5 nights you can carry the Bedouin strength was practice. Not a single brilliant evening, but many honest ones. If you want the sky to become a teacher and not a tourist, try a simple pilgrimage, night of one friend. Find Polaris, Orion's belt, or Alpha. Name it out loud. Measure its height. In fists. Write it down. Night of the moon. Watch the crescent tip its cup toward the sun that has just slipped away. Mark its age. Notice how its light changes your seeing. Night of the quiet. Go without naming anything at all. Breathe the sky into your shoulders. Let wondering be the only job. Night of the drawing. Make a sand sky or chalk sky where you are. 3 pebbles for the belt, a sprinkle for the milk. Road, a button for Polaris. Walk it. Let wind or rain erase it by morning. Night of sharing. Invite one person. Teach them one thing. Let them find it, not you. Say little. Pour something warm slowly. Between these nights, nothing in the world will have changed. You will have. The elders question and our answer. Elders do not demand that we live as they lived. They ask that we honor what kept them alive. If you could sit tonight at the edge of their majlis, this is what you might hear. Keep the roof dark enough to show its lamps. Not always enough. Let your tools help, not lead. Set a compass beside a star. Let them agree or argue. Be patient either way. Carry memory in more than one skin. Notebook, voice note, child's mouth. Be generous where the world is thin. Shade, water, welcome, silence. Practice before you need it. The desert is kindest to those who rehearse. What answers can we give? From apartments and porches and parks? We can shield a light. We can turn off the unnecessary glare at 10. We can keep a small field kit, a cardboard star wheel, a red lens, a cheap notebook, A pencil that writes reliably in cold. We can make a monthly habit. We can ask our grandparents the names they used and teach our children to pronounce them without apology. We can say, "I don't know" without shame and "show me" without pride. We can let the sky make us slower. On purpose. A community built of quiet acts. The comments under a video can be a bazaar of noise or a market of provisions. You decide which, by the way, you leave your basket. If you share, try to share usefulness, a memory, the first time you saw the Milky Way, the first time Polaris felt like a person. A practice, the night you measured a star with your fist and felt your own mind lengthen. A place, a park, a turnoff, a rooftop where the sky is kind. Add a note about safety and permission. A name, the word your family uses for a bright point, Arabic. English, another tongue. Put both if you can. Let the sky be multilingual. A fix, how you taught a porch light to behave, a neighbor you convinced, a bulb that didn't glare. A curtain that gave you back Orion. Every thread like this thickens the rope. Some people call it engagement. The desert calls it keeping company. What to do when the roof is veiled? There will be nights of cloud and nights of complication. Let them be teachers. 2. The Bedouin had a proverb for such hours. Clouds veil the roof, but the floor speaks. Indoors, the floor is books, voice notes, recorded chants, maps printed on ordinary paper. Learn a new star's name. Memorize one couplet. Copy a proverb with your own hand and tape it beside the door you use after sunset. Ask your house to be gentler to darkness. Close shades at night, dim screens. Let your body know it is time to be the animal it was made to be, diurnal, restful, ready to dream. A pledge you can whisper, not a pledge to a channel or a challenge, but to a way of seeing. Tonight I will look up with the eyes I had before I was hurried. I will trust a steady lamp. I will practice one small skill. I will listen for a sign I did not ask for. I will share what I learn as water is shared, quietly, cleanly, with thanks. Speak it if you like. Or just do it. The sky prefers deeds to declarations. The long echo. What happens when enough of us practice this? Town councils write kinda lighting rules because neighbors ask nicely. Schoolyards host a monthly night where teachers say less and students point more. A child who is restless the way some winds are restless learns to breathe with Orion's step and sleep comes easier. A nurse on the night shift keeps a red lens in her pocket and a proverb in her mind. A teenager convinces one building manager to aim one light down. The constellation on that block grows braver by 3 or 4 stars. A grandmother's lullaby finds its way into a language lesson and a science class at once. Small things, yes. But caravans are made of footsteps. Constellations are made of small lights. Night after night, we'll remember that the sky is the closest thing we share. Politics sort us, weather gathers us, the roof above us, ancient, exact, invites us into a citizenship older than borders. To stand under that roof and feel yourself both small and accompanied is to be given back a dimension that the day compresses. If we go to sleep with that feeling in our chest, the day will be better for the people who meet us in it. Your turn. In the circle we end where the majlis ends when the last ember fades, with gratitude and an invitation. Thank you for walking into this quiet with me, for letting the desert and its stargazers touch your ordinary life. Now, enlarge the circle. By adding your voice, not as a shout, but as a steady lamp for someone who doesn't yet know where to look. Leave a note for the caravan behind you. Answer softly, honestly, and in your own words. What forgotten wisdom from the past do you think still holds power today? Tell us a story. Teach us a name. Share a place. Offer a practice. Ask a question the sky might answer. Then go outside. 5 minutes, one friend, one breath that takes its time, and let the old roof become yours again. The night is listening. It always has been.